Most developers build projects that look cool, but completely fall apart once real users start using them. You end up adding a bunch of features, and suddenly your codebase becomes messy, your database logic gets complicated, and scaling the app feels impossible. That's exactly why in this video, we're going to build a full modern Reddit clone called Threadley from scratch. We're going to be using Next.js, Tailwind CSS, Prisma, and PostgreSQL. We'll create a complete full stack application where users can create posts, reply to threads, interact with content, and authenticate into the platform. But this isn't just about building features. I'm going to show you how to structure a real-world Next.js application properly. With scalable architecture, clean database design, modern server-side rendering patterns, and production-ready practices throughout the entire application. By the end of this tutorial, you won't just have another portfolio project. You'll understand how to build a modern full-stack app that actually scales in the real world. Okay, everyone, now let's get started. I already have here a folder opened up in VS Code, which is what I'm using for this video. And the first thing we need to do is set up our Next.js project. So to do that, I'm going to run npx create next app at latest. This will generate a boilerplate Next.js application inside of the current directory that we're in. That's where we're going to put a dot here so that it doesn't create an extra folder. And we're going to use the recommended defaults for Next.js. Now, while that's installing, let's start thinking about what we're building. So you saw in the demo, we are building a Reddit-like clone. In fact, I have it open over here, and I'm going to keep it open so that we can constantly be referring to this while we're building. Now, this is the first version I built of this, and as you can see, there's a lot of features here. Now, we are going to need a lot of stuff. We're going to need authentication. We're going to need database interactions, some cool UIs to display this kind of information, especially with the comments and replies. We're going to need to implement this in some way or another. And we're going to do that in the most optimal Next.js way possible. So the first thing that we need is to spend the beginning of this video setting up the infrastructure, right? So we just generated our Next.js project here. I'm going to run npm run dev. And as you can see, it will run on localhost 3000. And we also want to set up our core dependencies. Now, the first dependencies I want to install are related to the database provider that we're going to be using in this video. And if you've watched my videos in the past, you obviously know I'm using Neon, which is the best PostgreSQL database out there. And we're going to be using Neon. If you want, you can just click the link in the description. You'll be able to create your account there, but I'll do that later on in the video. For now, we're just going to install the Neon dependencies. We're going to be using Neon for Neon Auth for setting up the different tables. And to do that, we're going to be using an ORM, which is going to help us be able to execute SQL queries without having to manually write them, and rather just use JavaScript or TypeScript objects. And the ORM we're going to be using is going to be Prisma. So we're going to install Prisma with Prisma Client, and we're also going to install the Prisma adapter for Postgres. So that's going to help us set up everything. I'm going to run this command and it will install everything. Now, while that's installing, I'm going to open up another terminal over here. And here is what we want to install. We're going to install the following packages: Class Variance Authority, CLSX, Tailwind Merge, Lucid React, and Tailwind Animate CSS. Now, all of them are going to be for the UI of our website. Now, we're going to be using Tailwind CSS and ShadCN, which are two of the most powerful UI frameworks out there. And this is all going to help us set that up. So I'm going to install them. You can see here that our previous packages already were installed. And to finalize, we have installed some of the Prisma packages, but we haven't actually set up Prisma in our project. Prisma, like I said, is going to help us connect our project to our database. Now, to set this up, I'm going to npm install as a developer dependency, the Prisma package. And then I'm going to also install TSX. I'm going to install both of them and we should be good to go. Now, while that's happening, I want to set up our UI. Now, our UI is going to be using, like I said, ShadCN. And to utilize ShadCN, we're going to run npx ShadCN at latest init. Then it's going to prompt us with some questions. Then we're going to choose between either using radix or base. Those are just the two different component libraries for ShadCN. If you want, check out how the components look on both of the options and decide which one you want to use. But we're going to be using base in this video, and we're going to be choosing Nova as our preset. Now it's going to set up everything. This means it will create a components.json file into our project, and it will also when it finishes setting up everything, going to create a components folder with a UI folder inside of it. Now, it doesn't look like it because it was hidden, but it already added the button component for us. And what ShadCN is going to do for us is it's kind of going to change our entire style. It's going to give us pre-made components, UI components that we can reuse multiple times, and we don't need to actually install all of the components like if you were using other packages. We can just manually add whichever components we want to use. So it already added for us the button. We're gonna add the button anyways, but this is the command we want to use to add all of the different components we're going to be using in this project. So all of the components you see here, we need to run npx ShadCN latest add, and then put the name of the component you want to add. So actually, since we already added the button, it might be a bit redundant, so I'm going to remove here the button, but we're adding a card, an input, a label, a text area, an avatar, a drop-down menu, a separator, and a badge. So I'm going to press enter here, and we should see all of those components start showing up here in our UI folder. Perfect. It also set up here a utils file that we might want to use. It is this CN function, which stands for class name. It basically is just a very helpful helper function, which allows you to insert Tailwind class names, but merge them together through not having to like write all of them in one single line. You can actually give some space in between them. It makes it a little bit more readable. I'm not even sure if we are going to use this in this project. There's only a couple scenarios that it's really helpful. Now, what do we want to do? Well, we've set up ShadCN, we've installed our dependencies, but we haven't set up our database. Now, our database, like I said, is going to be in Neon. Now, you can go to neon.com, or even better, you can just click the link in the description and you're going to be brought to this page. If you have never created an account before, you can create. It's completely free. I'm going to sign into my account, and we're going to create here a new project. I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it Reddit clone, but you can call it whatever you want. Actually, the website we're building is going to be called Threadley, so you can call it that as well. And then you choose the Postgres version. I'm going to choose version 18. And for the region, you can choose between a bunch of different AWS regions. I am in the west side of the United States, even though I'm not in the United States, but I'm closer to Oregon. So I'm going to choose this one. But you want to choose the region that is the closest to where your users are going to be so that it has the best performance. Now, as you can see, because we're in the free plan, which you can by default, you don't have to pay anything, we're going to get all of these things over here. Now, we want to enable Neon Auth so that we can have the Neon Auth authentication system. Now, Neon Auth is actually built with BetterAuth. So I've talked about BetterAuth in the past. If you want, you can check out my course on BetterAuth, but this will be kind of a crash course on it as well because we're going to integrate it into this project. BetterAuth, in my opinion, is the best authentication provider in Next.js, and it's integrated with Neon, meaning that it's going to automatically connect to our database very easily without us having to do any complicated things. So we're going to set it up, click create, and just like that, we have created our database. Now, to create our tables, we're going to be using Prisma, right? So to start that, I'm going to say npx Prisma, which is a package we have already installed, init. And this will initialize Prisma in our project. Now, what does that entail? Well, what that means is we now have this Prisma folder in our project over here. And that includes a schema.prisma. Now, the schema.prisma is extremely important. Here's where we're going to define our Prisma schema. Now, as you can see, I have syntax highlighting here. This is pink and this is blue, and I can see clearly. If you don't have that, it's because you need to install the package here, the extension for Prisma. So feel free to install this one and then restart your VS Code maybe, and you will be able to see the syntax highlighting. Now, we're going to keep it as it is right now. The next thing we get is the prisma.config.ts. This is automatically generated by Prisma. I recommend not touching this at all. This is what we get from the changes we make to the schema. So you don't need to touch that. And that's pretty much it. Now, the next thing we want to do is when Prisma connects to our table, it utilizes the URL of our database. Right? Now, how is that connected? Well, when we ran npx prisma init, it created this .env file over here. Now, an environment variable file, you know what it is. It's a file where we can add environment variables that are not secure to be exposed to everyone. So the main environment variable here is this one. It's the database URL. Now, This database URL that they put here is by default is the one that just comes with everything. Like this won't connect to your table. Instead, what you need to do is you need to go to your Neon project, click on connect, and then you'll see your connection string over here. You click copy snippet, and you're going to replace whatever is in here with that. Perfect. Now we're pretty much good to go. Now, the last thing is we're not going to write our schema yet, just because I want to start building a bit of the infrastructure first so that you guys can have an idea of what we're actually building. But one thing I do want to do is when we make our changes to our database structure, we need to push those changes to our actual Neon database. So to do that, we're going to be having some Prisma commands that we need to run. Now, to make it super simple for us, and we don't have to keep memorizing the Prisma commands, I'm going to make some scripts over here that we can use. So every time we want to push our changes to production, right? We just made a change in our schema file over here, and we want to create a table or change a column name or something like that. We're going to run the db push command, and that's going to run the following script. It's going to run Prisma db push, and it is going to run Prisma generate. Now, what is the difference? db push is going to push the changes to our hosted database, and Prisma generate is going to create the local types for our database tables, and it's going to put everything inside of the generated folder. Now, what is the generated folder? It's going to be a folder that, as you can see here in the client, is going to be outputted into the folder lib generated Prisma. So we have this lib folder. It's going to create a folder inside of here called generated, and then put a folder called Prisma, and inside of that is going to have all of our type definitions for our table, so that we can be always in sync with how our table exists out there. Great. Now, what we're going to do next is we're going to go ahead and go to our globals.css, which is our main CSS file. It already includes a bunch of styles that were actually added by default and also by the ShadCN package that we installed. But I do want to make one change because we have a very specific color scheme here, right? The orange with everything to make it look a little bit more like Reddit, even though I don't want to make it exactly like Reddit. So I actually have a completely different color scheme. This color scheme that is over here, that exists over here, it includes a bunch of colors in Tailwind for both a light mode and a dark mode that are based on the ShadCN preset that we installed. Now, I made another one over here, which will change the color of everything. Now, we haven't applied it yet, so it won't actually apply the changes yet, but this will include all the colors that we've added for upvoting, downvoting, success, all that kind of stuff. And also, we are importing this specific CSS, which is from the Neon database UI. Now, for authentication using Neon, it's super simple because it has a bunch of pre-made components that we can use. Now, for the style of those components to be applied, we have to import this class over here, this package over here into our CSS file. Perfect. Now it is time for us to start building. So to get things started, let's go into our layout folder over here, our layout file. And I want to add some classes to start determining how our website is going to look like. Now, I don't care about light and dark mode. You can add that if you want to. It's super simple in Tailwind. I actually want to default it to dark mode. So I'm going to put dark here, and it will already default to dark mode. The next thing that I want to do is I do want to start adding some classes here. Now, we're going to add a BG here, default the background to be equal to the background color that we have defined in our tailwind.css file. We also want to change the text to be foreground, because then it is going to apply whatever class we put for foreground in every other way. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to start setting up authentication. Now, authentication is going to require us to have a Neon Auth UI provider that is going to wrap around our entire project. So that is going to go over here, and we're going to use the Neon Auth UI provider component. It's going to wrap our children. And let me just close this up. And it requires us to pass an auth client. This auth client is going to include a auth client type. Now, this auth client type, I'm actually going to put it outside of the component up here. Now, this auth client type is going to be created using the create auth client from Neon database auth next, and we're going to pass it directly inside of here. Now, the next thing we want to do is set a default theme to this. So I'm going to set default theme, set it to dark. Now, as you can see, we do have an issue. It says that it is executing scripts inside React components are never executed when rendering on the client. So what that means is that this function cannot be called in a server component, which our layout over here is. So instead of doing this, I'm going to actually create a folder here called providers, and I'm going to create here a file called the neon auth UI provider.tsx. And in here, we're going to basically force this to be a use client, meaning force it to be a client component, and just recreate what we just did over here, but make it into its own provider. It's kind of the same logic here, but we can actually force this to be a client component without having to force the entire layout to be client as well, because we want to optimize for server rendering since this is Next.js, and that's one of the main benefits. So we're going to do that, and that means that now we don't need this, we don't need any of this or this, but we need to wrap this around with the neon auth provider. And we'll wrap this as well, neon auth providers. And oh, I need to close this. And we should be good to go now. Now, if I go, I'll just delete this. If I go over here, you'll see we don't have that issue anymore. Now, there's obviously weird UI stuff, but we're gonna deal with that in a second. Now, I'm gonna open this up a bit. Now, what I wanna do is I want to create a folder in here, which I'm gonna call it core. You can name it main or any other thing like that. It's just to represent that this is gonna be where all of the core parts of the project are gonna exist. Now, the reason why we made it into parentheses is so that it doesn't actually affect the routing, because this is page routing, right? Now, inside of here, I want to create a layout.tsx. This is going to be a layout file that we're going to use to represent the core layout of our project. And we're going to export default async function, call it core group layout. And this will return the structure of our website. For example, it's going to have a header, it's going to have the sidebar, and it's also going to have the main content. Now, to do that, we're going to need to get the children of this component. So I'm going to make that be a prop. And the main structure here is, like I said, we're going to have a navbar. Then we're going to have a div with a left sidebar. And below this, we're going to have another div with the children. Now, we don't have those components yet. So let's at least create them right now. I'm going to make them into our components folder, and I'll make another folder called layout. Here, I'm going to create the navbar.tsx, and I'm also going to create the left sidebar.tsx. Now, let's start with the navbar. The navbar is going to have a export function called app header, and this function, or we can call it just navbar to maintain parity. This will just return for now a header tag. Now we can come here and we can now import this, and that error will go away. Same thing with the left sidebar. We can copy the logic here, go here, paste it, just change this to say left sidebar. Now, one thing I want to mention early on is in this video, I want to pack as much knowledge as possible on the logic of what we're building. So I am not going to be focusing too much on UI. It's something that I always do in my videos, and a lot of people like it because it makes the video shorter, and especially nowadays with AI, UI can be something that you can automate super easily. I will still address it and show it to you guys, but I won't be spending 10 hours writing CSS. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to apply some classes to this div. I'm going to apply a margin X of auto, display of flex, a max width, and a gap of 8. Then I'll do the same thing down here for the children, but I'm going to put a minimum width of 0 and a flex of 1. Now, what I want to do now is I want to push this page that we have here at the root of our app folder up into our core folder. Now, why are we doing that? Well, it's because now the layout folder that we've been playing around with affects that actual content, and all the other routes are going to exist inside of this core folder. Perfect. Now we can do a bunch of stuff from here on the navbar, since it's going to be what we use to navigate. So for the navbar, we want something like this, right? This is how it looks in mobile, and this is how it looks in desktop. So we want something that appears at the top and you can easily navigate. Now, to do that, we're going to come to the Navbar component, and we're gonna first just create the structure. I'm gonna put a div here with a logo. Now this logo is gonna be whatever you want it to be honest. What we're gonna add here is just a link from Next, and now what we're gonna add here is a link from Next, which I can import by importing the Next link component, and it will render a little T that is orange with the name of the project. Now, why did I do that? I did that so that we could have this Reddit looking logo. Now it's a link because when you click on it, it should navigate you to the homepage. Perfect. Now, one thing quickly that I want to do is, you notice how this is the font for our project. Kind of want to change that. I'm going to come here to not this layout. I'm going to come to the original layout, this one. And what I want us to do is just change the font. Instead of using Geist Sans and just mono, I'm going to keep, we're going to change this to actually use the interfont. So I'm going to import this function from Google, and I'm going to be using that instead. When I refresh, this looks a lot better in my opinion. Perfect. Now let's get back to the Navbar. And the next thing we want to do is below this link, we're going to add a div. This will be the search bar. Now for the search bar, we're going to be doing two things. The first thing is we're going to be adding this search component, which is actually an icon or a component that we can import from Lucid React. It will look a bit like this. It's just an icon that we show up. Now, obviously, the style of it yet doesn't really match what we want. What we need to do next is add an input that is going to actually search for the items. So I'm going to add here an input, which we can import from the base UI, not the actual package. We can import it from our own component library, and it's going to look like this. Now, again, I know it doesn't look perfect yet, but it's going to look a lot better in a second. I'm just going to add some props to this. We're going to make it read-only, not write. Now, why are we making it read-only? Because this is not a functionality that I'm going to add in this video. Now, in the code that you receive, when you click the link in the description, this is going to be implemented. The reason for that is in all of my videos, I do let you guys actually play around with a bit of the project. I don't want to show you guys how to build everything. I'm building 90% of the features, 10% serves as like homework, and I hope you guys actually implement them so that you can actually learn. Now, the next thing we need is we're going to close this div off, and we're going to finally add the information about whether or not the user signed up or not. Now, that information is a bit hard for us to have because we didn't implement yet the function like the pages for signing up, but we can add the button that is going to take us to the sign in or sign up screens. So what I want to do is I'm going to add this link, which is going to take us to a specific route. The route is going to be /auth/sign-in. Now you might be asking yourself, wait, we don't have that yet. We don't have those pages. Don't worry. I know that that's going to be the path name, and we're going to create them in a second. Now inside of here, what I want to do is I want to just add the text login, just like that. And we're going to do the exact same thing, but for the sign up, we're going to change this to say sign up, and we're going to change this to say sign up as well. Perfect. Now, how do we style this? Well, I'm going to come here to the class name, and I'm actually going to be using the CN package because the CN function that I mentioned before. This allows us to apply certain styles, and I want to make this link look like a button. So I can actually utilize this button variants function that comes from ShadCN, and it allows us to apply those styles here. As you can see, it becomes a button. Now I want to do the exact same thing on this one, but I don't want both of them to be orange because one is primary and one is secondary. So what I want to do is actually apply some configurations to this. The first one is the login. It's going to be a variant of ghost, meaning that it is going to be more of a secondary button. And the one at the bottom is going to have a variant of default, which is the one that it already has. Perfect. Now let's actually style this. I'm going to even put this up over here so you guys can see it better in desktop mode. So the first thing we want to do is we want to apply some really nice style to the overall header. And this is the styles we're going to add. We're going to make the header be sticky, so as you scroll, you can still see the header. Put it at the very top. Just add a small border to the bottom with the border color and make it slightly opaque so it looks a bit like this. Then we want to come back to the div right below, which also encompasses pretty much the entire thing, and we're going to style it such that we put a margin X of auto, display of flex so everything is right next to each other, put a fixed height of 14 with a max width to the thing as well, and we're going to center the items vertically with a gap of 4 in between them. So 4, 4, and 4. Perfect. Then we already put some styles to the logo, but we'll come here to the search functionality. The search, we already added styles to the logo and to the input, but we haven't done anything to the div that connects them. So I want to apply a class name of relative, position relative, margin X of auto, display of hidden, and when it's a medium screen and above, we make a display of block. What does that mean? It means that if you're in mobile, it disappears because the display is hidden. So now it already looks 1,000 times better. Now, the last thing I want to do is I want to come here to this div, and I'm pretty much just gonna put some centering stuff and also a gap of 2 in between these 2 items. Perfect. We aligned them automatically and we put a display of flags with a gap of 2. Now we are able to see this on every single page. Now what happens when I click on these buttons? We're taken to pages that don't exist, including the sign up and the login. Now, how do we make those pages exist? Well, do we need to build their own UI? Well, not really, because with PedroTech and Neon Auth, we can actually set it up super simply. So to do that, we're gonna create here a page in our app folder called Auth. This is gonna handle this is not a page. It should be a folder called Auth. And this is going to handle all of the Auth related stuff. Now, Neon Auth requires us to put here a catch-all for path name, because then whatever path we're introducing here is going to pretty much have the same UI. Now, what UI are we talking about? We're talking about the form that allows you to sign up or to log in. And that's going to exist because of a component from Neon Auth called Auth view. So what we want to do here is export default async function auth page, and this will allow us to return a div with some UI that is gonna match both the sign in and sign up screens, another div inside of it, and then we're gonna put the auth view component from Neon database auth / react. Now let's refresh this. Maybe I need to just restart my server. Let's see if it works. It seemed like I had a panic, so what I usually do when that happens is I just kill the next folder and I run npm run dev again, and hopefully it doesn't break. So let's see if it breaks. No, it doesn't. Okay, sometimes Next in development does that, so don't worry about that. So next thing is, let's try to go to the sign up page now. Now you see it exists and it already has some UI in the middle of it, which is crazy. So we, just by adding this small thing over here, we already have this, and we have this for sign up and for login. Now you see both of them have the same thing. It thinks we're in the sign up page no matter where we are. And the reason for that is because we're not kind of determining where we are supposed to go, or this auth view component doesn't know which route we're in. To actually know, we have to get the path name from the route through the props. The way you do this in Next 16 is you get the params prop from this component. It's a promise. And then in here, you can get whatever the path name is by awaiting the resolving of this params, then passing it as the path name to this. Perfect. Now it knows that we're in the sign up because we're in the sign up route. If I click here, it knows we're in the sign in because we're in the sign in route. Perfect. Now this isn't technically perfect because we even though it's using our styles and everything, it's not actually centered in the screen. To center it, we're gonna have to manually apply some styles here. First, on this div, I'm gonna apply a display flex, a minimum height, a width to be full, and a display flex direction to be column, with everything centered. The next thing I want to do is add a class name for the div here. I'm gonna make it be a width of full and a max width of medium so that it has that specific, it's not cluttered, and it will apply to both the sign in and sign up. Perfect. Now to actually get the authentication to work, we have a couple more things that we need to. First thing is we need to set up our Neon Auth setup. So I'm gonna create here a file in our lib folder. I'm gonna call it auth.ts, and in here we want to create a variable called auth. It's gonna be equal to create Neon Auth, and we're gonna use that function from the Neon database /auth package. Now in here, it's super important that we add two things: a base URL and a method for us to handle cookies. So cookies with a specific secret. Now, how do we do that? Well, first, to get the base URL, we need to come here to our project, go to auth, which we previously enabled. And as you can see, we are set up with PedroTech. We go to configuration and we'll see our auth URL over here. Now you can actually copy that and put it into our .env file over here. And in here, we're going to create two more variables. We're going to create the Neon Auth base URL and also the neon auth cookie secret. Now, what is this cookie secret? Cookie secret is a bit different. It's actually a 32 character random string that you add that is going to be unique to your project. You can easily generate one. You don't have to get it from Neon or anything. You generate it by running the following command: OpenSSL random at a base 64 32 characters, and it will give you a string. It will randomize that every time you run this, so feel free to just run it once or whatever you want and just get that value and apply it to the environment variable. Then the next thing we need is the database URL, or the auth base URL, which we can get from this. I'm going to copy that, paste it in here, save it up, come back, and we're going to apply them by utilizing the process.env.neonauth base URL for the base URL, and for the secret, we're doing the same thing but for the cookie secret. Now we have this auth variable that we can use throughout our project. Now, what can we do with it? Well, there's a lot that we can do with it. In fact, there's a couple of things that I actually want to simplify for us. I'll create two different helper functions that we might use throughout our project. The first one is going to be called getCurrentUserID, in case we want to get their ID. And I'm actually going to use the cache function from React to cache this value, since when the user logs in, we'll get their ID, and we don't need to constantly be asking what the ID is and making a fetch request to Prisma. Instead, we can just get the cached value. So that's going to return a promise with a string or undefined. And what we want to return from here is we want to get from the auth the session. So get session, and this will return to us the data from that session, which we're going to change the name to say session. And in this function, we need to return the session ID, or the user ID. To do that, this session object gives us information about the user who's logged in and their ID, and we can just return that. So this is a helper function we can use whenever we need to get the current user ID. Now, the last thing we need to do to make auth work is set up an API route. Now, why do we need to make an API route? Because with whenever we log in, it's going to utilize whatever session it's using to get the information and also register the information. So we're going to create this API folder over here, and inside of it, we have to create two more folders. We have to create the auth folder, and we're going to create a kcal path to the path, just like this. This is what is required from Neon Auth. And then inside of here, we're going to have a route.ts. Then in the route.ts, we're going to just paste the following code. This is directly from the docs. It's how we actually handle authentication and all of the methods required. It's how they actually execute those methods. Perfect. And now we're pretty much done. We are able to sign in and sign up. Now, before we try it, there's one more thing I want to do. I want to start setting up some of our tables, because there's one table that is required for when we work with authentication. Now, all of the users table for users will actually be handled by the auth service, so we don't need to worry about that. But I want to add more information about the user. Specifically, I want to save a username per user. So that's something that I want to do. I want to have like a profile for the user. So we're going to create a table for that. Now, to create a table for that, we're going to need to finally start touching on the schema.prisma. Now, to do that, we're going to come here and we're going to create a model. A model allows you to create a table. It's what you define for a table. We're going to create a table called user profile. And inside of here, we can define how this table is going to look like. It's going to be super simple because, again, when a user registers as their name and all that kind of stuff, we don't need to handle that. That's all done by Neon Auth. So all we need here is the ID of the user, which is going to be a string of type ID. We need a username, which is going to be a string, and we need to make sure to ensure that it's unique. And then we need a created at. Now, a created at in Prisma is going to be pretty much this over here. It's going to be a datetime type. We're going to default to the moment the user tries to add. That's what this function here does. And we're going to map it, which means we're basically changing the name of this field so that when we interact with it, it's not going to be created at like this. In camel case, it's going to look like this. And we are making it into a timestamp. Then I want to map this entire table. Now, what does this map function does? Instead of saving the table in our database as user profile like this, I want to save it as user profiles, just like this. Perfect. Now, what do? Well, because we created those two scripts in the beginning of the video, I can just run npm run db push, and this is what's going to happen. If everything is working, it should actually push the changes to our table, generate the types, and make everything work. If I refresh this right now, you'll see that we have this new user profiles table with the exact specifications that we talked about. But on top of that, we're going to have that type accessible when we try to call Prisma client in our project. So now let's test this out. I'm going to come here to our project. I'm going to try to sign up. I'm going to create an account here called Pedro. And then I'm going to create here an email called pedro@gmail.com. And I'm going to make a password 123. Yeah. Create an account. Perfect. Now we're logged in. How do I know we're logged in? Well, I don't actually. Let's check it out. If I refresh this, we should see a profile. Actually, we shouldn't. Sorry, we haven't actually implemented that. That's what we're going to do next. But there's a way to check this. We go to Auth, and if there's a user here, it means the Auth is working, but we're not creating a profile for the user when they create their account. But authentication is working, which is perfect. Okay, now how do we create a profile and a username for the user when they create their accounts? This is actually going to be slightly more interesting than I originally thought. We're gonna create here a folder called db in our lib folder. And in here, we're gonna create a file called user profile. This is gonna create a function that is going to help us generate a username for the user when they create their profile, and also ensure that they have a user profile. Now, why are we making generated usernames? Well, first of all, Reddit does that, and I think it's a cool exercise, but also I think that I don't want to add more UI to the base UI components from here. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to focus on just generating a random username. And then as an exercise, if you guys want to add the functionality to edit the username, you guys can do that as well. So the first thing we need is we need to have a generate username function. So what this function is going to do is it's going to utilize a bunch of JavaScript functions to replace stuff and generate random values. And it's going to get the base, which is your first name, add an underscore, and add the random values that we generate over here. So that's the idea. We get the base. So if my name is Pedro and it generates 1, 2, 3, 4 randomly, my username is going to be Pedro underscore 1, 2, 3, 4 or something like that. So that's the idea of this function. The next thing we need is we need to create this function called ensure user profile. What does this mean? Well, this is going to be an interesting function. It is going to ensure that the user has a profile. If not, it's going to create one. So it's going to require some information from Neon. It's going to require the ID of the user, the name of the user, and also profile picture of the user if they have it. So we're going to make it optional. And then later, it's going to return a promise. Now, what promise is going to be that? Well, it's going to be the user promise. Now, what is user? Well, user is going to be a type that we're going to create. We're going to have a file here called types. And throughout this project, we're going to be creating different types that more like match what we want in our code, and user is one of them. So we'll just create that type, import it from types, and this is what a user will look like. Now, inside of this function, we want to first check to see if a user already has a profile. How do we do that? We create this variable called existing, which is pretty much going to be a Boolean, or it was going to be an object which when null, it becomes false. And we're going to await Prisma. Now, what is Prisma? Prisma is the arm that we're using. But why can't I access Prisma? Because we haven't set up Prisma as a client for us. Setting up Prisma as a client is pretty simple because there's no way around it. You just have to copy and paste the file from the docs. Now, what that means is you create a prisma.ts file over here and you copy and paste the following code. This is from the docs. The only difference here is the Prisma client will be a bit different. So I'm going to import the Prisma client from our generated folder, which if you remember, I told you guys that it would create a generated folder. When I ran npm run db push, it generated this. And this is a Prisma client. We create a function called create Prisma. We generate a variable called Prisma. And now whenever we want to interact with our tables, we just import this Prisma variable from the Prisma file. And guess what? Because we generated the types, it knows now that there is one table in our database called user profile. And we can actually interact with that table and it will know the TypeScript types for all of the columns. So that's one of the best parts about Prisma. So I'm gonna call this function called find unique, which allows us to find a unique item in a table based on some unique constraint. Now the unique constraint is the ID. So we're trying to find if the user logged in has the ID equal to the neon.id. Neon.id is just the user who's currently logged in. Then we're going to do the following. If the user exists, meaning there is a user in this with this profile, just return it.
So whenever we want to get the user profile, not just the user session, we can call this function. And if it exists, we're going to get it. Perfect. If not, we want to create one. Now to create something on a table in Prisma, we basically call the Prisma.userProfile again, but we call the create function. Now when we create this, we're going to return a row, right? The row of the table that we just created. So that's why I created that. And the create function allows us to pass some data. What is the user profile that we're trying to create? Well, it's going to be a user profile with an ID equal to neon.id and a username equal to generate username. Now, generate username is the function we created, and it requires us to pass a name. How do we get the name? Well, we can get the name from our props, just like this, but we need to do neon.name. Now, after creating the profile, we return it because it's the whole purpose of this function is we check this, we return the profile back to when we call it. If it doesn't exist, we create it and then return it. Perfect. Now, when do we call this? Well, we can call it multiple places. But most importantly, I want to call it in our auth.ts. Similar to this get current user ID function, I want to create another function. Let's call it get session user. It's going to be pretty much the same function, but instead of just returning an ID, it's going to return a session. So I'm going to import the type here for user, and I'm going to import the ensure user profile function. And the idea here is it's going to get the session. I'll refresh this. It's going to get the session, and then it is going to create a profile if the user doesn't exist. So we're not calling that function yet, so probably not going to be a profile here, but we can call it somewhere in our app. Where do we want to call it? Well, let's be simple. I want to go to our layout over here. So I'm going to go to the core layout, and then in here, or actually, should we go? No, yeah, we'll go here. In here, this is a server function. So I can just call the await get session user function, and I don't even need to do anything with the user. I mean, I'm going to, but I don't need to do anything. When I save this and I come here and I refresh the page, it will create the user profile for us. Sorry, that was the other one. Let me refresh this. Perfect. Why? Because it got the session of the user logged in, detected they didn't have a profile, and then created. And this is the username that it gave to me. I know it's a weird one, but the usernames on Reddit are even weirder. Perfect. Now we're pretty much set with this. What do we want to do next? Well, if we look here at our UI, we have a lot of different things that we can address. I think one of the things I want to address first is going to be just this layout over here. The reason for that is because it is going to be a quick win. It's going to be a bunch of UI that I'm not going to manually write it. And it's going to make the page, the website already look 1,000 times more like what we're trying to build. Now, before we do that, there's one more thing. The Navbar here, I'm logged in, but it still shows the two login and sign up buttons. Now, the reason for that is because in our Navbar component over here, we're not actually gating this UI based on whether or not the user signed in or not. We could just use those two functions that we made here, import them here in their Navbar, and just use them. But you know what? There's actually a better way to do this. How? Well, Neon Auth allows us to call inside of our UI actual function components like signed out, and this component is a wrapper component. And if we wrap it around some sort of UI, like this UI over here, it will make it such that it only shows the UI if the user signed out. Now this works both ways. They also have a signed in component that when called, it will allow us to put information or UI here that will only be shown when the user signed in. Now, what kind of UI do we want to show when the user signed in? Well, first things first, I want to show a link that is going to be a button to create a new post, just like this. Now, I'm going to make the route that is going to navigate to be called the submit route. We don't have it yet, but it's going to look just like this. I click on it and then it'll take me to the submit screen. Perfect. Now, the next thing I want to do is going to be a notification button. Now, notifications is not something I'm going to do in this video, but I'll create it over here no matter what. It's going to require us to add a button from ShadCN and also a bell icon to look just like this. Perfect. Now I can, in the code, when we push this, it will include the notifications functionality. So if you want to practice without looking at the code first, feel free to do so. Now, below all of this, I want to show the profile of the user, right? I want to have like a little drop down with the profile image if the user has one. Something, actually, I'm not logged in on this, on the final one, but if I was, it was going to look like that. So how do we do that? You're probably expecting it to be super complicated when it really isn't, because with Neon Auth, I can just do user button and boom, I have the information about the user logged in. It's a drop down, takes us to the settings, to the sign out, all of that good stuff. Now, that's pretty much it for our Navbar. Okay, so now that we have that, let's start building the next part of our layout, which is going to be the left sidebar. Now, to do that, we actually want to pass in some props to this left sidebar component. The first one is we want to add a prop that is going to allow us to determine whether or not to show this call to action to sign up, just like this. So to do that, we need to know if the user signed up. So I'm going to create this prop called show call to action, and I'm going to pass in the information of whether or not the user signed in or not. Then in our left sidebar over here, I am going to create this prop, call it show CTA, and then just make show CTA be a boolean. Perfect. Now in this component, we don't want to use a header. We actually want to use an aside tag because it's a sidebar. Then inside of this, we want to add a type of navigation. So I'm going to add a nav, and there are a couple different places we can navigate. We can navigate to the home screen, the popular, the all posts. Those are the major types of navigation. So we're going to create here a function or a list, sorry, at the top here, which is going to handle that. Now that list is going to keep track of all of the different navigation places that we can go and have a label, an icon, and a match for them. Now for the icons, I'm going to import all of them using Lucid React, which is our icon library. And it should render the following icons. Now, when we navigate between them, we actually don't change the page. All we do is we add this variable over here, this search param over here that we then use to filter out the information in our list of posts, which we, by the way, don't have yet, but we're going to do it in a second. Now, we're going to leave that logic for later, but rendering the navigation links is very simple. We're going to go through the nav and map through each of the options, get their href, label, icon, which by the way, we're going to turn into a component. So we need to make sure that it's capitalized, and the match. Then we're going to, this shouldn't be parentheses. This should be a curly brace. Perfect. Then we're going to render the following UI. I'm going to get here active, set it equal to, is this the active route? Because if it is, then I want to change the color of the background and also the color of the icon. That's the idea here. So we need to know if it is the actual active route. So if the match is equal to home, then we check to see if the path name of the current route is equal to the home path name, which is just an empty route. To get the path name, we can actually utilize this hook. In fact, I want to turn this into a client component because this is pretty much just client stuff. So I'm going to make it into a client component. So we can use this hook called the use path name hook from Next Navigation, which allows us to get the path name without getting the props and so on. It is very useful in situations like this. And I'm going to check here if the path name is equal to the home route. If it is, then it is active. Else, we're going to check to see if the match is going to be equal to hot. If it is, then we check to see if the path name is equal to, so path name is equal to the home route as well. Or we check to see if the match, I'm just going to copy this entire thing, is equal to the last one. Now, I know this looks confusing, but wait a second. We're going to deal with this. If it is the new, we're going to check to see if the path name is equal to that. If all of that, then we're going to set it to false. Now below this, we're going to return some UI. I'm going to return a link component from next link, and this will include an icon, which we're going to grab from the props over here. And this icon, we're not gonna do anything to it yet, but we can render the label from the props over here. And then we're gonna wrap this around with parentheses, and finally wrap all of this around with parentheses as well. Now we can save this and it won't break anymore. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to add a link here. The key is going to be match. The href is going to be href, and it will look a bit like this. Now we have to apply some styles. The styles I want to add here, like I said, will depend on whether or not it is the active screen or not. Now to do that, we're going to be using the CN function, and we're going to apply a display flex, center the items, and a gap of 3. Now right now it doesn't actually detect anything. you can see it does navigate between the different routes, but it doesn't detect anything and it doesn't change the color based on it. Now we are able to apply the logic for that, especially in the icon over here, as you can see, but it's pretty much making all of them be active. It's acting like all of them are active. Now, the reason for that is because we don't have a way to get this variable yet, which depends on each of the routes. So all of them are in the home screen, but what differs between them is what is sorting the screen, right? The home just shows everything. The popular should show the most popular ones, the ones with the highest upvotes, and then all posts should do the same thing. It will show the newest ones. Perfect. So what does that mean? It means that in here, we need to get that search param. Now to do that, we're going to be getting here a variable called sp, which is search param, and using the use search param hook from Next Navigation. Then we'll get this sort variable, set it equal to sp get sort, and whatever comes after that thing on the URL will be what we get for that sort variable. So what we're checking here is, okay, yeah, we're in the home, but it's only active if the path name is equal to home, but also if it's neither hot nor new nor top. So you see, when we're not in home, it knows when we're in home and when we're not. Now for the other one, the hot, the logic here is going to be that if we are in hot and the path name is correct, we also want to check to see if the sort is equal to hot. The last one is pretty much the same thing, but the sort is equal to new. Now it knows exactly where we are based on the sort value over here. Perfect. Now we can come below this navigation over here, and we're going to add the bottom, which is the call to action. For this, we're just going to add a p tag that says, actually, we need to show the tags. I even forgot about this. We'll show the tags here, which we can render this component called left tags. Now, left tags is going to be this. It's going to be the top tags in our UI, which we don't have yet. But this is going to be part of our layout. So I'm going to create here the left tags component. And in here, we're going to export a function called left tags, which for now, we're just going to leave it empty. It's going to be in an ordered list, but we're going to leave it empty. And we're going to import it from here. Now, below this, there's something that we can show. We can show the call to action. So I'm going to check to see if we do need to show that. I'm going to call show call to action. If we do, then I want to render a div, and inside of it, I want to have a join CTA card component. This component will also be part of the layout. We're going to call it join CTA card.tsx. And here's how it's going to look. It's pretty much just going to be, it's going to use the card component from ShadCN, all of the individual components that comes with it, and it is going to create this UI. Now to render it there, we need to actually import this, and you'll see that we don't see anything because we are signed in. So I'm going to sign out, and you'll see that we get navigated to this, but if I go to the home page, we can see it over here. Now, obviously, the sidebar looks ugly. Don't get me wrong. It's because we didn't add all of the parent classes that we need to. So we'll start with the A side over here. I'm going to set the thing to be hidden unless we're in a large screen, so that if we are in a small screen, it gets hidden. Then I want to add a class name for a space in between each of the items here. So this, and this, put a space of 1. Perfect. Then I want to add some styles to the bottom part. We're going to start by adding some styles to the to this div over here. Just going to make a margin top of 8. There's some space. And then for this p tag over here, I'm going to add some color to it and some style of where it should be. Perfect. Starting to look a little bit more like that. Then for the show CTA, all we need is also a margin top of 8. Perfect. And just like that, we are good to go. Now, the only thing left with this is add the tags, but we're not there yet. I think now it's a good time for us to focus on our main page, which is the page where we show all of the posts. I'm just going to sign in into my account again, and let's see if it works, because we haven't actually tested login, and yes, it does. Okay, everyone. Now it's time for us to build our feed. So what does that mean? It means this main page over here, it will render this UI. Now, first things first, we want to delete all of this, pretty much all of it. I'm going to delete it. And then I'm going to wrap this around with a div, and this div will be wrapped with another div, which will contain another div. Now, what we want here is we want to have the feed sort tabs. So you can sort similar to what we have here, but this will be available also in a smaller screen. You'll be able to filter through the options. Now, to do that, we're actually going to be creating a component called feed sort tabs. And
we're going to create it on our components folder, but in here, we're going to create a new folder called feed, because there's going to be a lot of components that are going to be part of the feed. This is going to be the feed sort tabs. Now, in here, I want to export function feed sort tabs, and I'm going to return some div, which for now I'll leave it empty. Come here, import this. Perfect. Let me just make this smaller so we can see it as well. Now, inside of here, it's where we're going to render the actual feed. But the thing is, to render that feed, we need to have data inside of our tables. And to have data inside of our tables, we have to have a table for storing the posts that the user makes. So what we need to do now is we need to start setting up our other tables. Now, we already know how to set up a table. We create a model in our schema.prisma. So we'll go a little bit faster this time. The first thing we want to do is create a post table. Now, how do we make that? Well, a post table is going to be a model, which we're going to call post. Now, I'm going to paste it here and you guys will see what exactly it is. It's going to have an ID for the ID of the post, an author ID that is a reference to the user who created that post, the title of the post, the body, and when it was created. Then we also want to create a post tag. Now, what is a post tag? A post tag is going to be a type of like a table which a user is able to tag a post with. It's going to be, for example, all of these tags over here. Now, you're able to tag a post with a tag and also be able to create a tag. So this is the format of a post tag. It's going to have an ID in which that relates a post to a tag, and also a tag slug, because a tag is going to be its own separate table. I know it's sounding a bit complicated, but don't worry, it's all going to make sense when we finish this. A tag is going to be another type, which I'm actually gonna, should I put it, where do I put it? I'll put it here. So a tag is going to look like this. It's going to have a slug, which is basically the hashtag, a label, and a hash collar. So we're actually going to put some collars to the different tags. Now, the next thing we need to do is we need to establish all of these relationships, right? So there are tags that everyone can use. There is a post that any person can post. And every time you make a post, you can tag that post with a tag. That's the relation between the three of them. Meaning that in the post tag over here, we need to establish the relationship between between the post tag and the post table, and between the post tag and the tag table. So to do that, we're going to create here an instance. So for every post tag, we're going to have a post related to it. Now, to establish the relation, we're going to use the relation function here, and we'll need to reference what are the fields that connect them. Well, in the post table, we're connecting this post tag through its post ID, and that post ID should reference the ID of the post. Now, we're also going to add an onDelete policy, which basically means if a post is deleted, delete the post tags as well related to it. And we're going to add the cascade to do exactly that. Then we're going to come here and we're going to do the exact same thing, but for the tag. So we're going to create here a tag. It's going to be of type tag. The relationship is going to be the tag slug with this slug of the tag, which slug is basically the ID. Now, we're not going to have this on delete cascade, because if I create a tag, and I delete a post in which I used to create that, I don't want to delete that tag. Other people might be using that same tag. So perfect. We created that relationship, but a relationship goes two ways. And that's why we have some error messages over here, because what we need to do next is establish the relationship on the other side. So let's go to post. In post, we have to say that each post can have a list of post tags. So we're going to create post tags and we're going to make it into a post tag array. Now we got rid of the first error. Then we'll go to tag and we're going to do the exact same thing. So a tag can have a list of post tags. Perfect. Now we are able to have all of those relationships. There's other tables as well that we want to add, but for now we'll keep it simple. We'll keep it just like this. So I'm going to run the same command we added before, and it should make the changes. It should generate the types. And when it's done, we should be able to see the new tables appearing over here. Perfect. So now let's start developing the structure of this. So the first thing is I'm looking at the feed here, right? But it's empty. Even if we were to fetch that data, it would be empty because the tables are empty, right? The post table is empty and all that. Now, what I like to do is I want to build a UI without having to manually create all of the posts myself first. And the way I do this is I seed my database tables with mock data so that I can build a UI while seeing data that looks real but really isn't. Now, the way I do this is through a script. Now, that script is going to go as a folder in the root of our project. We're going to do here scripts. I'm going to create a scripts folder, and I'm going to create a file here called seed.ts. Now, if you want, copy this entire seed file from the code base, because I'm not going to go over it. It's basically going to be a script that all it does is it creates data in our table. So it's going to add data into our table. It's going to create posts. It's going to add tags related to it, post tags related to it, and so on. It's also going to add some fake users, as you can see over here. Now, just one note that I just realized is that for us to run this, we actually do need to have like actually no, we can just remove this. Sorry, I'll just delete that, which was what we were using for doing the comments and the upvoting stuff. We don't need that yet. So we just have this script. Now, this script asks us for us to have the .env package. So that's actually something we do need to install. I'm gonna run npm install .env. And the next thing we need to do is we need to go to our package.json and add a script that is going to run this. So I'm gonna create here a new script, db seed. And db seed is going to run with TypeScript that seed.ts file. Now let's see what happens when I do that. I'm gonna run npm run db seed, and if everything is working, it should create 20 posts with 20 different accounts. Now, when that's done, I'll be back. Perfect. It says it's done. Now let me refresh this. You can see we have here 20 accounts or 20 posts. We have some tags as well, some post tags, and so on. Now we don't have user profiles because those are not actual users. They're not gonna log in, but at least now we should be able to see that information when we fetch that data. Perfect. Okay, so in order for us to display this information, we're gonna first have to fetch that data. Now, the way we're gonna do that is we currently have the feed sort tabs, right? But there's nothing in it. But that doesn't really matter, right? Because that is only used for filtering. And right now we don't even have the data showing, so it doesn't really matter what we filter. Now, to actually get it to fetch that data, what we're gonna do is we're going to first make this an async function. So async function. Then I'm going to come here and I need to get the session user. So we're going to say session user equal to await get session user. Then what I need is I want to fetch the data from our table. Now I'm going to create a helper function from that called list posts sorted. Now, what is this function? Well, even though we don't have currently the functionality to sort and filter the posts based on the different tabs over here, we are already going to create the infrastructure for that to work. Now, this list posts sorted function, it's part of a queries file that we're going to create here. In our DB, we're going to create a queries.ts. Now, in here, we're going to create a bunch of different functions that we want to use to query data in our app. So I'm gonna say export async function list posts sorted. Now, what is this function gonna take in? It's gonna take in a sort, a tag filter, and a user ID. Now, what are each of those? Well, first of all, the sort is gonna be of type feed sort. Now, we will have to add that as a type on our types.ts over here. We're going to add this type called feed sort, and it basically represents the 3 different ways in which you can sort the posts in the feed. So you can sort it by hot, new, and top, just like in Reddit, I believe. So we're going to put that as the type here, feed sort. Then tag filter, it will be a string for us to know what kind of filter we are going to be implementing. And then for user ID, it's going to be the same type. It's going to be string or undefined. Now, what are we returning from this? Well, we're going to be returning this type we're going to create here called feed post row. Now, feed post row will require us to have a post as a type. Now, we don't have that yet. So we're going to come to our types over here, and we're also going to create that. A post is just an ID, an author ID, a title, a body, a tag slugs, created at, and a comment count. Then we'll import it over here. And what this returns is returns a post, the score of the post, and the user vote. meaning the person who's currently logged in, what did they upvote? Did they downvote it? Are they neutral, like they didn't do anything, or they upvoted? So that's how we're gonna find out. So in this function, we have to get that kind of information. Now, to do that, we're gonna first call Prisma. I'm gonna create here a variable called post rows, where we await Prisma.post.findMany. Now, we didn't import Prisma, so we'll do that. And in here, we're gonna have a where condition, which basically allows us to specify what are we, like, out of the posts table, what posts are we trying to fetch. Now, this is actually going to depend on a couple of things. It's going to depend on the tag filter. Now, why? Because the tag filter, when passed, will allow us to filter for just specific tags. So for example, I have some tags over here. If I click on web dev, it should only show the ones from web dev. Next.js, only the ones from Next.js, and so on. Now, in order for this to work, we have to have this functionality where we are able to detect which tag the user is pressing. So the way we're going to do this is, as you can see, the tag is going to be on the URL. When we call this query function, this list post assorted, we're going to get that tag from the URL and pass it as the tag filter. Then we're going to construct this where condition over here. We're going to create a variable called where, and it's going to depend on whether or not tag filter is passed, because you don't necessarily need to be filtering for a specific tag or a specific hashtag. So if there is, then we're going to look for the post tags and only show the ones where it includes, that's what the sum condition here means, includes in the tag slug field that specific tag filter. And we lowercase it in order in case for like, if like, it doesn't matter, right? If TV shows has TV capitalized, it's the same thing as TV shows with TV under capitalized or lowercase. Then we're going to pass this over here to the where. Since this is JavaScript, I can just do this. Then we're going to order this. We're going to order it based on the created at. So we want to create at and in descending order. And we only want to show the first 50. Then what we want to do is we need to get the list of IDs from the posts. So I'm going to say IDs, access the post rows, map, and I'm going to create a list of just each of the post IDs. Now, why are we doing that? Well, first of all, we can check to see if there is no post. So if it's 0, it returns an empty. But if there is a post, then we need to get a lot of things about that post that are related to this post, right? We need to get whether or not the user voted or upvoted or downvoted for this post. We need to get whether or not the total sum for the posts. We need to get the total amount of comments for the post and also the tags for the post. Now, if you look over here, we don't have all of that data. Right now, we just have tags and we don't even have upvotes. So we're gonna focus on just the ones that we have. We wanna get the tags for this specific post. So to do that, I'm already going to set up the infrastructure for when we actually need to get the other information. I'm going to call a promise.all. Now, why am I calling it promise.all? Because it's going to be a lot of different async operations that are going to happen at the same time. And that's why I want to get the result of them over here through a tag map. Now, tag map is just the result of us fetching the tags for that specific post. Now, to do that, we're going to create a function called tags for posts, and we'll pass the IDs of the posts we want to fetch the tags for. Now, let's create that function inside of here. I'm going to create it down here, and this is what the function is going to look like. It's going to be called tags for post. It's going to require post IDs, and it's going to return a map, that specific data structure that we're going to be using for all of these functions that are going to go here, which will return a string and a list of strings. Now, how will this look like? Well, I'm actually going to post here, just copy and paste what I wrote for this function and go over step by step what it does, because I know it looks confusing, but trust me, I'll explain it. So the purpose of this function is to load all the tags for a given list of a post of IDs, right? So of post IDs. So the callers can attach a tag list to each post without having to run into an issue called n+1. Now, if you've never run into that issue before, the n+1 problem is when you run one query to load n parent records, and then n more queries, meaning one per row, to load any related data. So instead of loading all those relations in one or two batched queries. So the relation to here is that for us to load this data in the tags for posts, n+1 would be loading a list of records with one query and then running another query per row. That's why it ends up being n+1. But this function avoids it because it fetches all post tag rows for every post ID in one single find many, instead of calling the DB once per post for its own tags. And how this function works is we first create an empty map of that is what we're going to return. Then we check to see if it's empty, just empty return before we do anything. Then we fetch every post tag row with the post ID in its input list, meaning that each row ties one post to one tag. Then we are going to loop for every requested post ID. We're going to pre-fill the map with an empty tag array because that's how maps work. It's not like a normal array. That way posts with no tags still appear in the map with an empty array instead of just being completely missing. And then finally, we loop through the rows and it adds the tag slug for the specific post, completing the operation. Now, when we get that data back, we're going to use it together with all of the other data we're going to get back from this promise.all. Now, we're going to get this and we're going to make it called mapped. We're going to call it post rows. We're going to map it and get each of the row in here. Now, for each of the row, we're going to utilize the result of what we got from here to get the information about each post. So for example, to get these slugs, we get the tag map and we use the get, which is a function that only applies to like maps. This isn't an array, and we pass the specific row ID. Now we also want to default it to an empty array in case that is the case. And then in the end, we're going to return the following object. Now for now, we're going to just return a post with a certain value. I'm going to put no for now, but we'll do it later. A vote score, which again is just the value of how many likes this post has, or how many upvotes this post has, which I'm going to put as 2 for temporarily. A created, which is going to be the created at time. I'm just going to use the get time function. And finally, the user vote, which I'm just going to make it be 1 because I'll make it pretend like I upvoted this post. Now we're going to get the data for this and this later, but for the post, we can actually do it right now. Now to do it, I want to actually create this function called map post row. Now this function is going to exist as well inside of here. I'm going to create it here. It's called map post row. Now there's a couple types we do have to create. First is the post record, which actually, because it comes from Prisma, we don't actually need to. I can just import it. It would probably call it post model, I guess. Yeah, so let me just, actually I'll just make it post model. It's literally the one from the generated types. Then the tag slugs, which is an array of string, the comment count, which is a number, and the post in the end, which we already have that type. It's just erroring because we haven't returned anything. Now what we'll return here is we literally just return the full result of this. Now, how do we get that full result? Well, it's going to be the ID, which is just the row ID. We just get the same thing. Same thing with the author. Everything the same. The only difference is the comment count and the tag slugs. But the comment count we don't care about because we don't have it yet. But the tag slugs we already have. So I'm going to pass the row first. Then I'm going to pass the slugs. And then for the last one is going to be the map of, or not the map, but the count of comments. I'm going to make it 5 or 65 just for the sake of it. Okay, now we're almost good to go. All we want to do now is we want to set up the sorting. So again, we don't have the functionality to sort yet, but we have this sort variable, which we can assume will implement it. So we want to check to see what are the kind of sorting that we want to do. Is the user trying to sort for new? Is the user trying to sort for the top? So we'll do sort equals to top. Or is it for hot, which is the last one? And let me do this properly. Perfect. Now, let's start with new. If it's for new, it's the easiest type of sort because you literally just get the created time of an item minus the created time of another item. And if it's positive, that means that it's sorting by the latest. If we are sorting by top, then it becomes a bit more complicated because we're going to sort it based on a bunch of different criteria. But this is what we want to sort it by. What makes a post be a top post? It means it has maybe the highest upvotes, maybe it has the highest comment count, and those two pieces of information matter a lot, right? So I think the most upvotes is probably the top post. The most comments is if you have 2 of them which are equal, then you prioritize the one with the highest comments. And to finalize, the one that is the latest. So if you post something right now, it will first check to see if it is the one with the highest upvotes, then the one with the highest counts, and then if it is the latest one. That's the condition for us to sort by the top. And hot is a bit more complicated. Again, it kind of uses what we just did for the top, but it applies some conditioning based on when it was created. So we calculate the vote score and the comment score for two different posts, and it sorts based on the difference between them plus the amount of time that this has happened. So that's how we're going to sort the last item. Now, when this is done, we want to return here the final result of mapped, and we're going to map it, get each individual post, and we're going to create this structure, which is a structure that we want to return over here at the top, right? Actually, where is it? Did we even define what type? Okay, we didn't, but it's what we're going to return here. It's going to be a post, which is an x.post, a score, which is going to be an x.vote score, and a user vote, which is going to be x.user vote. And that's what we get. Now, where are we using this function in? Well, we are calling it in our, did we even use the user ID? I think we might need to, we're going to use it later for when we set up actually detecting if the user has voted already for this post. But right now we don't need that. So we're going to come back here to the page. We're going to import this function, and we need to pass in the sort, the tag filter, and the session user.id. Now, some of these just messed up, right? This should be sort. Now, where do we get the sort and the tag filter from? Well, like I said, it's going to be in the URL. So what we need to do is we need to kind of switch up what we have here for the definition of this component and insert the search params as part of the props so that we can get the URL. Now, there's going to be two parts of this search param. There's going to be a sort and a tag. This is what matters here, right? If you sort from a tag, it is going to apply a tag. And if you sort based on this, it's also going to apply a sort to the URL. Those are the search params. Now, I'm going to make this bigger because right now we're not really looking at that, right? So the first thing we want to do is we want to get the search params. So I'm going to await search params. Then we want to get the sort raw value, which is just, we get the sort value out of the URL. So the raw value, it will be like top, new, or hot. Then we want to basically just to maintain type safety, we're going to convert them into the feed sort type that we created previously. So we apply the exact same types in case someone messes up or put like a capital letter or something like that. Then what I want to do is I want to add get the tag filter. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to get the tag and I'm going to lowercase it. Perfect. Now we're pretty much good to go. Now, what else do I want to do with this? Well, we got the list of rows, right? It should be returning us some pretty good data. So what I want to do is I want to make this a bit smaller and let's actually render this data. So inside of this div over here, we're going to say rows.length is equal to 0. If true, then I want to render a p tag that is going to show that there is no posts available. So if we didn't succeed in fetching this data, we should see that happening, but we don't because we succeeded and the rows are not empty. Now, how are we going to display the rows? Well, we're going to do something a little bit hacky here. We're going to create a function that returns a UI. I'm going to create a function called cards, and I'm going to loop through the rows. Get each row, and we're going to return something. Now, for each of them, I want to get the author. Now, we're going to use the author by ID. Now, what is the author by ID? The author by ID is going to be the actual author for each of the posts. Now, again, because we're solving for scalability here, I'm not just making everything simple for you guys to see. I want to make it actually efficient and safe. We need to get the information of the author IDs one by one. So the way we do is we first create this author IDs array, which is going to be an array with a set of each of the individual author IDs for each post. Then we want to use that to call this function called batch authors for IDs. This function is going to batch, like the name says, is going to batch fetch all of the author IDs. We're going to come here to queries and we're going to create that function. I'll make it up here. Now, how is this function going to look like? We don't want just the author ID. We want information about the author, like their username and so on. So it is going to get a list of IDs and is going to batch fetch a map with the ID plus the user information of that author, so that you can see their username, maybe their display name, their profile picture, all that kind of stuff. So then to do that, we're going to start by creating a map or a set out of the author IDs. Now, why are we making a set? Because a set only already by constraint implies that it's all unique items. An array can have duplicate values, but a set can't. That's why we even called it unique. Then we're going to fetch the user profile table, and we're going to pass in each of those author IDs. We're going to get back the rows, and we will create an empty map of the result. Now we want to import user here. I just realized that was also messing up. And what we're going to fill in this map of results. To do that, we're going to loop through the list of rows, and we're going to append the specific values in the set. Then we're going to double check to see if it already exists, and we're going to add the user with their specific username, just like this, if they don't have that value. And in the end, we're going to return the result. Now I'll come here and we're going to import the batch author for IDs. And I want to also include the session user. So we're going to check to see if the session user and the author by ID has the current session user, then set the session user ID as a session user. So set the current value so that we don't fetch the data of ourselves. We already have that information. We're just saving some bandwidth of our request. Now that seemed like a lot. I know I went a bit faster on this. It's just because this doesn't really matter. You could have just, again, you could have just done this in one line with fetching all of the authors. And if that's your interest, you can do that. But here we're making it actually more scalable for when you have a lot of data. Now we're going to use this information to get the information about each of the individual authors. And I'm going to say post.author.id, and it's going to get that information. If there's no author, of course, we want to just ignore it. So if there's no author, return no. A post has to have an author. But if there is an author, then I want to return a post card. Now, what is a postcard? A postcard is going to be a component we're going to create which represents each of the individual posts. Now, what kind of data do we need for it? Well, it's going to need the post itself, the author, the tags by slug that we made, the score, and the user vote. Now, we are gonna actually make this just an empty array for now because we don't have that data, but we want to create this postcard component. Now I'm gonna come here to our feed and I'm gonna create the postcard.tsx. Now in here, we're going to export function postcard, and we need to make sure that it has all of those props that we defined when we called it, right? It needs to have a post, an author, a tags by slug, a score, and a user vote. We're going to import all of the types from here, and even a tag, which I don't think we actually have as a type. So let's come here and create that. And then let's import it over here. Perfect. Now this will return some UI. So we'll return here an article because this will be a post card. So it's good for us for SEO for us to define it as an article. Then for now, we're going to ignore the upvote and downvote buttons. What we do want to do is we want to return a div, which is going to have another div inside of it. And this will create the individual user profile. So we can see what we're doing. I'm going to auto import this, and this has to be a map. Can I just do that? New map, string tag, and then just put like nothing. Let's see if I can just do this. Oh yeah, I can. User vote, why does it say it has to be a number is not assignable? Did we make this oh yeah, because let's actually specify that we want to return here a feed post row, and then I think that error should go away. Yeah, okay. So now we should be able to see that data. Now we haven't done anything yet, so don't worry about it. Wait, what does it say here? Oh, I'm pretty sure it's because just we're forcing this to be this value. Okay, let's go back here. So we're going to start by, we have this div, another div. We're going to insert here a user avatar. This is a type that we can get from Neon database, Auth React. And it's going to be a component that shows the avatar of the user. Now we need to pass the actual user info. And because we fetched the user info directly from Neon, we can just pass the author and apply the size of it to be small because I don't want it to be too big. It's not the full page, it's just a small one. Perfect. Now, the next thing is we want to create a link. This link is going to be for the user profile of the author. Now, we don't have that page, and we're actually not going to create that page for the project, but it's going to be serving as like a extra credit, or like if you want to do this as like a practice, it's going to actually be way easier than a lot of the stuff that we're doing in this project already. Now, for the href here, I'm going to put a post and insert the post.id. And I want to import this link from next link, and we should already be seeing some actual data here. Did I log out? Yeah, I did. So let me do pedro@gmail.com and then do password 123. Log in. I don't think that matters necessarily for what we're trying to fetch, but what I can do is I can, oh my God, I just realized why it's not showing. I'm sorry guys, I have to actually render the cards. And to render them, it's actually super easy. There's a couple ways of doing it. There's a hacky way, like I said, which is just get the cards and filter for nothing. And then this will display the list of cards. Or actually, maybe this will work. Yeah, this will work. We can just display them like this. Okay, I know they're ugly right now, but you can see we are getting some information. All of them have this name just because this is the name that when we seed our information, it comes with. So at least we know that we're getting that data. Now, let's continue building the user card, the postcard. The next thing is we want to add a little span here with a dot to separate the username. And then we want to add a span, which is gonna call this format relative time function, which is gonna just basically, I always use this when I build projects with like social media aspects to it. We pass the post.created@, and it's going to format this time based on how long ago the post happened. Now, there's a couple packages you can use to do this. I like to just create it, especially nowadays with AI. It's super easy for you to just create like a batch of your own like formatting library. For example, for the format relative time, is going to look like this. It's going to be a big function, but the idea is it gets the time in which a post was created, and it returns some strings that are more readable for the user. Like, oh, was the post just now? Was it a couple minutes ago, a couple hours ago, days ago, weeks ago, whatever. And we can just import, and you see that they were a week ago. Now, you might be thinking, well, I just posted this, right? I just created all of this. Why does it say a week ago? It's because I'm recording this a week after like the beginning of this video. There's a big time gap in between me recording this video and the different parts of it. Now I'm gonna come here and I'm gonna put a link again. This time is gonna be for the actual post, for going to the individual page of the post. So we're gonna put an H2 with the post.title, and I need to put an href or else that's gonna just keep screaming at me. We're gonna go to the post slash, and then we're gonna do post.id, but we need to actually put this. Perfect. And okay, you can see the titles. I know it looks very ugly, but you can see the titles. Then we want to show the actual content of the post. So I'm going to put a p tag here. And this is kind of interesting. Some posts, if you go to Reddit right now, you don't see all the posts being listed out directly here, right? Sometimes if the post is too big, you get what is known as snippets, right? Snippets of the post. Now, to get a snippet of the post, we're going to create this function called a snippet, and I'm gonna put it over here. It basically just puts a max amount of time of like amount of a post, and it returns that slice to us with some 3 dots at the end. So in here, we're just gonna pass in the snippet and pass the post dot body. Perfect. Now we can show the tags. I'll do that already, even though we won't actually show anything because we haven't finalized that yet, but we want to get the primary tag of this post. Now, what is the primary tag? Well, it's just the first tag, right? It's the one that we're going to show. To do that, we need to get that information from the tags by slug. We just get the primary slug, and we get the primary tag by getting the tag from that tag slug. Then, if there is a primary tag, we want to render a div with, let me just self-close it, and then let me also add actually, I don't need to make it into I'll just make it double ampersand. And in here, I'll put a link that is going to take you to that specific tag. Same thing to works over here. If I see this tag, I can click on it and it will actually change my URL to fetch for just that tag. So we're going to have to do that. Now, to make a link where it updates the search param, you actually have to do the following. You don't put it like any other routes, you just keep the same one you are right now, and then add the search param, and you're going to use this function called encode URI component, and we'll just pass the slug. No, it's not primary slug, it's primary tag dot slug. Perfect. Then inside of this link, we're going to render the tag. So I'm going to put hashtag and then say primary tag dot label. Perfect. Then, like I said, we're not going to see it yet. We're going to see it later on. The last thing we want to do is show the number of comments. So below this, we're going to add a div with a span which is going to include a message square icon. And then we're going to put the label, which is going to be just the post.comment count. And we're going to say comments, but all of them is going to say that they have 65 comments because that's the value we hard coded. Finally, I'm just going to add a share button. I won't show myself writing it because it actually won't work because we're not adding that functionality. Again, it's part of the exercise if you want to add it in the end. Now, how do we make this look 1,000 times better? Because it looks very ugly right now. Well, I'm going to add the UI for the items here, and I'll be back in a second to show you guys the Tailwind that we just added. Okay, everyone. So I just added all of the Tailwind CSS. If you want, you can take a look at them. Take a look at all the classes. One thing you need to know is add the CN class from our libutils file so that it works. And this is how it's going to look like. Now, obviously, there isn't the gap in between these items, which makes it look a bit weird. But the reason for that is because we need to actually add some CSS to the original page as well. For this page, the CSS is going to be pretty chill. We're just going to come here to this div, add a flex. Let me make this smaller so you guys can already start seeing this. I'm going to add a flex with a gap of 8. Then in the feed sort tabs, I'm going to add a minimum width and a flex of 1. And then most importantly, we want to put a gap of 4 in between each of the cards. So in the div that we render the cards, I'll add a space y of 4. Perfect. Now, what do we want to do? Okay, now let's get started with the tags, right? Because that's something that we actually did a lot of already, but we just have just a little bit more that we have to do. So we have here the tag filter. That's totally fine. Below the rows, right before the author IDs, what we want to do is we want to get the list of tags. Now, to get the list of tags, we're going to have to use this function we're going to create called list tags. And this function will actually be pretty simple. I'm not going to go into full details of it. I'll paste it here and you guys will see. All it does is it just fetches the list of tags by using the prisma.tag.find many. So we have the tag table over here. If I go to tables, you'll see the tag table. It includes all of the tags and we're just returning all of them, including their color. Then what we want to do is we're going to export this, come here to the page, import it, and we're going to get the tag map and create a map of tags. We're going to map it, get the tag, and create a map where it's going to have the first this slug of the tag, and then the actual tag. That's the way we're going to identify it. And now we can pass the tag map as the type here. So you should see now that we do get the tag, the primary tag appearing for each of the posts, just like we did over here. It's pretty much the same posts, I guess. Perfect. Now, what else do we want to do? Well, let's test to see if actually, we don't have the current filtering buttons at the top. That's something that we should probably add. Now, we created the feed sort tabs, but we never did anything with it. Now, one thing we can do with it now is we can pass in some props to it. We want to pass the current filtering or sorting type, actually just a sorting. We'll pass the sort here. And then we also want to pass any tags that we want to filter for. So we'll pass the tag filter. Now, we'll have to create both of those props as prop types that we can pass into this component. So current is going to be of type feed sort, which if you remember is just, is it hot, new, or top? And then the tag is just the actual tag that we get back. Now, the way we're going to structure this is like this. We're going to create a tabs, which is basically going to be a list defining the icons and the labels of each of the different sorting and filtering functionalities. So basically, we're assigning for the hot, the new, and the top, what are the icons and the labels associated to them. And the ID, which is what we're going to be using to associate with the current sorting value. Then we want to render each of them. So I'm going to create a div inside of here, and I'm going to loop through the list of tabs. And for each of those items, I'm actually going to close this off. I'm going to come here. I'm going to render first, get the active value. So we get the current and say if it's equal to the ID. Now the ID we get from the tabs. So it has 3 pieces of information in this object. It has the ID, the label, and the icon. So we're going to destructure it, get the ID, label, and icon. But the thing with the icon is it's a component, right? This is a component. It's an icon. So we have to transform it into a component, and a component always has a capitalized first letter. So we do that. We check to see if it's active. If it is, we're gonna change a bit the UI here. So we first render a link from next link, and we're gonna put inside of this link the icon. Then below this, we're going to put the label. Now we can kind of already see this happening here. We probably need to pass a key here, ID. And actually we should probably pass an href. Oh, this is kind of interesting. So when we press the different options, right, we actually want to sort it, just like how we want to sort it normally. I'm going to put like an empty thing here, but you can see it looks like this. We haven't added UI yet or styling yet, but that's fine. When I click on this, I want to actually navigate to and change the URL to actually sort for the proper values. So for that to happen, I'm going to use this function we're going to create called href4. This function will take in a sort value and a tag, and it's basically going to update our URL to actually match what we want to sort or filter for. Now we'll just come here, pass in href4, and then pass the sort, which actually should be just the ID, and the tag we want to filter for. Now, if I actually click on those buttons, you'll see it will update the values at the top. Perfect. Now, why did we make it be active? Well, because if it's active, we want to make the color change. Now, I'm going to apply some of the Tailwind CSS now so that we can at least start seeing it. I'm going to pull this back a bit so we can start, we can see the CSS being applied automatically. So for this div, we're going to apply a bunch of class names here just to give some space to this. Then I want to apply a display flex and a gap of 1 in between them so that they are sideways and also have a bit of space in between them. Then here's the important one. We're going to apply a massive style for the link, which is going to include a class name function so that there's some space, and the active, which will determine, we'll use it to change the color of the icon so it becomes orange. Perfect. Now we are correctly going through each of them. Now, how is it actually doing anything? Well, not really, because all of them have the same vote counts and comment counts. Now, for us to get it to actually sort properly, we also need to add the functionalities of sorting and vote for comments and voting. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to open our schema and we're going to create the remaining models that we need for this project. So what are the models that we currently don't have that we need? Well, it's the vote and the comment. I'm going to add them down here and I'll go over what they look like. Now, this is what they look like. A vote is a user ID of the user voting, the target type of where they are, what are they upvoting? Is it a comment? Is it, is it a post? And a target ID, meaning what is the ID of the item they are upvoting for or downvoting. And the value just means, is it upvoting or downvoting? So it's -1, it means downvoting, +1 means upvoting. For comment, it's kind of a similar thing. ID of the comment, ID of the post we're commenting in, ID of the user who is commenting to that post, and then there's parent ID because there's replies, right? There's threads. That's the whole point of Reddit. And then the body is just what you're commenting. Then obviously the created at, and then the post. Now we want to create the associated comments for the post. So we're going to come here to post and create here the association so that that error goes away. And then we can push the changes. Now to push the changes, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a db push. So I'm going to come here and open this and do npm run db push. We should see everything running properly and we are pretty much good to go. I think so. Let's take a look. Yes, we can see the comments and the votes. Now, I want to delete all of the posts that we already created. Now, why am I doing that? And I'll delete the tags too. It's just because I want to have a seed our table again. But now I want to seed it with the voting and the comments. Now, if we go down here, let me take a look where we commented out. Did we comment out vote? I'm pretty sure we did. Let me see, comment. Okay, actually, we want to completely update this to include voting and commenting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually have two types in here. I'm going to have the seed and the seed with comments and votes. That's a huge name, but yeah, we're going to add both of them. And then when we come here to our package.json, we're just going to create a new type here. We're going to create the new script, db seed cv, which means comments and votes, I guess. And then we're going to import this, copy that name, and then update this. Perfect. Now let's run the CV version. Let's see if it works. Hopefully it does. And we're going to get all of the posts with comments and votes. Perfect. It says that it's done. So let's refresh this. Oh my God. Yeah, it worked. So there's a bunch of posts, tags, and votes. So if we come over here, nothing should have changed because we haven't implemented fetching that data yet. But that's what we're going to do right now. So what we need now is we're going to go to our queries over here, and we're going to finally implement the rest of the queries from this promise. Now, I'm going to do them all at once, but I'm actually no, I'm going to start with just commenting. So we're going to add another function here, which we're going to use to query. It's going to be called comment counts for post. And it's also going to pass in an ID list. And it's also going to return a comment count map. So it's similar structure to the tag map. Now, what is this function going to look like? Well, let me go to the tag map and I'm going to paste it here so you guys can see what the comment count for post looks like. Same idea as the tags for post. The idea here is we're literally just getting the number of comments per each post. Now, it looks complicated, but if you go line by line, you'll see it's the same idea here. We're just creating a map and returning it that way. And if you're not familiar with the map data structure, then it might look a bit confusing. Then what we want to do is we get the comment count, and we're going to use the CC map over here to get the comment count by just saying CC map.get past the row.id and also default to 0. Then instead of saying that it's 65 by default, I'll just pass the comment count. Now let's take a look what it looks like. There's an error here. Let's see what it is. It says group by is not defined. Maybe this will go away now. Let's see. Okay, let me just kill my dev environment. Sometimes I have to do that because definitely we generated the types, right? It seems like it. So now it works. And you see that it says 3, but I guess when I made the seeding, which by the way, the seed file was completely generated with AI, it added only 3 comments per post, which is fine, but we're getting that number. So it means it is working. Now, for the upvoting or just voting in general, it actually requires us 2 different things that we currently don't have. It's going to require us to pass in a function called the vote sums for post, which is the same idea as the comment counts for posts. It gets the list of IDs and it gets the total amount of, I mean, not the amount, but the sum, right? So if it gets the upvotes and subtracts the downvotes. But also, we need the user votes for posts. So we also want to know which posts the current user voted for. So this is where we're going to use the user ID. Now, how do we make this 2 functions? Well, first, let's go to the vote sums for post. It's going to be exactly like the comment counts for post, but it's going to be for voting, right? So it's going to use the vote table. Now, is this breaking? Did I write it wrong? Probably. I wrote it. Oh no, it's just giving an error because we haven't made the user votes for post yet. It's okay, we'll make it right now. Now for the user votes for post, it's a bit different. So I'll just explain to you guys. We are basically getting just the list of the posts where the votes, where the user ID of that vote is equal to the user ID of the user logged in. That's the main differentiator. And also, we're not looking for people who upvoted a comment. We're only looking for people who upvoted a post. So that's the target type over here. Now, you see there's no errors, but there isn't really any data being shown. That's because we never did anything with the result. So we're going to get here the result, so the map. We're going to use VS map, which means vote sum map, and then UV map, which means user vote map. Then we get the VS map by basically doing the same thing as the comment count map and just applying it over here. So you see now, are we even displaying the vote? I don't think we are yet. So we'll do that in a second. And the user vote, we're basically going to just get the value of the UV map, and if there isn't anything, we're going to default to 0, meaning that the user hasn't either voted, upvoted, or downvoted for this. Now, let's go back to the postcard. Because this is where we're going to add the upvote and downvote buttons. So I'll make this smaller so we can see it better. And inside this article, but at the top here, we're going to create a vote buttons component. This component will take in a couple different pieces of props. So it's going to take in the target, because this is voting for a post, so we're going to put post, a target ID, which is the post ID, the score, meaning what is the current amount of votes that the user has or the post has, and the current user vote, which is the data that we just got. Now we're going to create this component in the same feed over here. We're going to call it vote buttons.tsx. And then what is this component going to look like? Well, first we're going to export function vote buttons, and the props for this is going to look like this. It's going to be a target, which is a vote target. We haven't made that type yet, but basically there's two options. We'll make it over here. It's either a post or comment, and a target ID, which is a string, a score, which is a number, and a user vote, which again is either -1, 0, or 1. Now we can start just building the UI. I'm going to return here a div with a button. This button will include a chevron up icon, which is just an upvote. We're gonna import this component now so it doesn't give us an error, and we can see the upvote appearing over here. Okay, an upvote. Then we want to create another button, which is gonna be the chevron down, right? It's the downvote. Perfect. It might appear, yeah, to the right. Then in the middle, we want to render the current values. So it's gonna be a span with the score, which should be the sum. I think all of them end up having 2 upvotes maybe, or 3 upvotes and 1 downvote. I don't know what the seeding actually did. Now, what do we want to do here? Well, first of all, we want to have the on-click functionality for this button to actually allow the user to upvote a post. Now, on click, we're going to call a function that we're going to create here called vote. Now, this function will require us to pass a value. Either we are upvoting or downvoting. So either 1 or -1. For example, if I want to upvote, I'll call the vote function and then call 1. If I want to downvote, I'll call the vote function and then pass -1. Perfect. Now it is complaining because this is not a client component right now, and to have an on click you have to have a client component. So I'm going to use a client component here, and that might be why you're wondering why we didn't make this an async function. We're actually going to have to work around with this because this is a client component. Instead, we're going to have an action over here, a server action that we can call depending on whether or not this is a post or not. So we get the target, we check here is post, and it's basically if the target is equal to post, then we know it's a post. Now, if it is a post, then we want to call this function called vote post action. If not, we're not going to do anything yet. But the important thing you need to know is this vote buttons doesn't only apply to the post. We're going to reuse it in the individual comment sections. So when you go here to a comment, it doesn't have any comments on this one, but yeah, all of the ones that I have here don't have comments. But when we do add a comment, you're going to see that you're going to be able to upvote it. So we're going to reuse the same kind of functionality. Now, why is this giving us an error? Like I said, this isn't an async function because this is a server, this is a client component. I actually want to use client functionality. And a great example of this is us actually utilizing the use transition hook. So we're going to use the use transition hook to get a pending state here and a start transition. So use transition. If you're not familiar with the use transition hook, I have a video where I go over every single hook in React and I go in depth about the use transition hook because it's one of the best ones. Then I'm going to start the transition, going to get an async function, and I'm going to put this over here. Then we now have this. Now, what is this vote post action? Well, we don't have it yet, but we can create a folder in our lib folder for all of the different actions that we can do in this project. So voting is one of them. Creating a post is going to become one of them. Commenting is going to become one of them, all that kind of stuff. Now in here, I'm going to create all the actions associated to a post, and we're going to create the first action. Now, we're going to have a couple actions in here. The main one that we want to focus on right now is going to be the voting action. Now, what is a action, right? If you're not familiar with Next.js, this is a server operation that we can run, which at least in the way we've organized this project, it is going to mutate some data rather than getting some data, right? And the way we're structuring this is it's going to require us to take in 2 things here. One is the post ID, which is when we're voting, which post are we voting for? And what is the value? Like we've talked about, value can be either -1, 0, or 1. But the thing is, when you're voting, it can only be either -1 or 1, because if you're voting, you're not being neutral. You're not. A 0 usually means that you didn't actually do anything. You didn't vote. Now, the next thing is we want to detect to see if the user is logged in. Now, with every server action that requires a user to be logged in, we have to do this. So we're going to get the current user ID, utilize that helper function we've used before, and then we're going to just have some very minor validation here saying that you need to sign in to vote. Finally, we're going to call this function called vote post, which is going to require the user ID, the post ID, and the value. Now, the reason why we're separating this is just to actually keep it a bit organized and separate the concerns. Even though it is similar what they do, this will just make it easier for us to understand what each function's purpose is. Now for the vote post function, it's going to require the same kind of arguments plus the user ID, and it is going to return a promise, but it's not returning any value. It's just going to be void. Then what do we want inside of here? Well, first of all, we want to know if the user already voted for this post or for this actually in this case it's just for a post. It's not voting for a comment, so it is pretty much just for the post, right? We need to know if the user already did that. So we're going to create here a value that represents that, and we're going to await call the get user vote function. This get user vote function is going to be a query, so it's not going to exist in here, and it will require us to pass the user ID, which is why we even did that. We'll specify what kind of target this is, right? Is this a comment or a post? It is a post, and we need to know which post it is, so I'll pass the post ID. Now, like I said, we have to create that query over here. So we'll go to our queries, go to wherever you want to go here, and you export async function get user vote. Now, what does this function require? So it requires three things. It requires a user ID, a type, which in this case is going to be a post, and we have to create that type, which should be chill. Type should just be either a post or comment. So I'll create here this type, and we can just import it over here. Then it will also require the target ID. Now, what does it return? Interestingly enough, it is going to return obviously a promise, because this is going to be an async operation, but the result of it is going to be either the user has downvoted this, or they didn't vote at all, or they voted positively, they upvoted. So that's the result. We're trying to check to see if the user has done this. Now we want to early return if there is no user ID, meaning we just assume it is a 0, meaning they're neutral. And then we're going to await Prisma.vote and then find that unique item in the table and then this is where we're going to utilize a bit of the Prisma notation, right? So when we created our vote table, you see that we created this ID type over here, which is basically there's a unique item for every vote that is a combination of the user ID, target type, and target ID. There's never going to be two of the same for those. So what I want to do here is I want to specify that connection by utilizing the user ID, target type, target ID. This is auto-generated by Prisma because we defined this to be a specific ID. The combination of all three is a unique ID. So we'll pass the user ID, the target type, which is just going to be the type that we get from the URL or from the arguments, and then the target ID. Now, when we get that back, pretty simple. We get the value by just getting the row.value. And then we want to return if the value is equal to -1 or the value is equal to 1. If that's true, then just return the value. If not, give 0. Why do we do that? Well, because if for some reason it is something different, it is, I don't know, 3, 4, we have to account for that kind of stuff, right? If that's the case, we don't want to return V because that's not actually what we promised. We only promised these 3 types. So that's why we guarantee that it is by validating. Anything else, we just say that it never voted, the user never voted. So let's import this. Then we can utilize this finally. And how are we going to utilize this? Well, we get the current value. Now we want to get what is the next value. This is going to be either -1, 0, or 1. And it's just going to be the value that we want to vote for. So the value we get from the argument. If the current is equal to the value, then we return the next, we set the next to be 0, meaning if you basically undid, right? You were upvoted before, and then you press the upvote again, it kind of undoes upvoting, but it also doesn't downvote. It just becomes neutral. That's how Reddit works. Then we want to await Prisma.vote.delete many. Now, why are we doing that? Well, if you're voting for something different, right? If you previously upvoted and now you're downvoting, we first want to delete the upvote row in the table. So we delete where the user ID and the post type and the target is equal to post ID. Before we even add the next operation, we delete whatever was there before. If what you just chose to is not equal to 0, right? So that's the condition in which you didn't just upvote twice, meaning you become like you press this twice and now you don't want to either upvote or downvote. If that's the case, then we want to create a new entry in the table, where we actually put the new value, either a downvote or an upvote. And that's how this is going to work. I'm going to import this, and now we do have to pass a value here. So we're going to pass the target ID and the value. Perfect. And one thing I want to do as well is do some cache and revalidation here. So after we have the vote post over here, the vote post action, I want to revalidate the path for the home page because now it's outdated, and also for the specific post. Now we haven't made that yet, but when we do, it is going to matter. Perfect. Now this error is because this is a server action operation, right? So we want to make sure that we use server in here so that this doesn't give us an error anymore. Perfect. Now let's see if this works. Now we won't be able to see the actual, behavior or the UI maybe. Let's see if I click on that. Did something happen? Should be 3 now. Let's click again. Okay. It worked, and it did save that information. If I press again, it should go to 2. Perfect. If I press down, it should go to 1. Is downvoting not working? Let me press once, refresh. Interesting. So downvoting seems to not be working. Let's check on the vote buttons over here. We'll check this out, but for now, let's actually just expand this a bit, and we can actually make the UI of this look a little bit better. Also, one thing I want to do, I just realized, I want to utilize the use router hook. So const router is equal to use router. We'll get that from next navigation, and I'm going to just router.refresh after this is done. Now, I want to apply the styles for this. So the style will be a bit interesting. First of all, we're going to apply all of these styles and also an area label for the buttons. So this is how the styles are going to look like. I'm going to import the CN. Like I said, it will depend on whether or not the user is upvoting a post. So if I click this, you see, did that not actually upvote the correct one? Oh, it's upvoting one above. That's interesting. We will address this, but oh no, it is upvoting the correct one. But when we upvote, because we're in the top, it just moves the thing up. But bottom line, I can just do this properly, just as you can see, can downvote and so on. Now, what is the next thing I want to do? I want to apply the same kind of style and area label for the downvoting. So I'll come here, apply this, and now we have both. Now, the major styling here is going to be for this div, but this div is going to depend on whether or not this upvote and downvote buttons are for a post or a comment. We have this boolean here called isPost, and I told you we're going to reuse this component for both commenting and posts, right? So what I want to do is I want to create this 3 different class groups. One is for the icon, one is for the entire stack, which is this div over here, and one is for the score, which is the score that we show here. Now it's going to depend on whether or not it's a post or not. Just the styling, the movement, they're very similar, but the spacing might change because a comment is a lot smaller than an actual post. So we'll start by applying here the class name for the div. We're going to apply the stack class, and you'll see that now it actually looks proper. Then we want to go to the score. The score is going to be this, and we want to apply the following. We want to apply a class name with a score class, but also if the user's already upvote or downvote, we want to set the text upvote and text downvote classes. So I can downvote, I can upvote, and now it actually works. So as you can see, it does look a lot better. Now, what do we want to do? Well, I want to now finally apply the icon class. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to go to both icons, and I'm just going to apply the icon class. I'm here, icon class. Perfect. And to finalize, this is basically it. We're able to upvote and downvote in our project. Now, what is the next thing we want to do? Well, we've done a lot for this. Maybe what we could do just last here is disable the buttons while it's pending. This might be pretty good actually, because that's the whole point of having the use transition hook to get this pending state. But other than that, we are pretty good. I want to close this up over here. We can take a look at everything here. We can see the different posts, but there's one thing we can't do. We can't click on a post and go to its own page. We also can't currently create a post, but that's fine. So we'll start with just clicking on the post and going to the individual page of that post. To do that, the first thing we want to do is we want to come to the core part of the app, and I want to create the post route. Now this route will also have an ID folder inside of it because it is going to be a dynamic route. So inside of that ID folder, I'm going to create the page.tsx. Now, what are we doing on this page.tsx? Well, we're going to be exporting a default async function called post page. Now, in this post page, I want to get from the URL the ID, which is a dynamic param that we're using here. Now, to get that ID, I want to say await
params and get the ID, similar with the search params that we've done before. Then I need to get the information about this post based on that ID. So to do that, I'm going to say const post equals to await get post by ID, which is a query we haven't made yet. So we're going to go back to our queries over here, and we're going to create this function, which is going to be the get post by ID. It's going to take in an ID, which is a string, and the result is going to be a promise that it's returning a post, and or undefined. Those are the two options. Now, how do we fetch an individual post based on an ID? Well, we've actually done this or something similar a lot already. We're going to utilize the same kind of behavior we did for the tag and comments for posts. So I'm actually going to copy this, bring it closer to there so that you guys can easily see what we're doing. It's the same behavior. In fact, we're going to reuse some of the functions that we've used already. But first, we need to get the post. So we get the post, and the thing is, we can't just return this. We can just return the row. Why? Because that's not exactly the type for post. Post includes a lot more than just this. It includes the tag list and also the comment count, which are two operations that are separate. So first, we're going to check to see if the row is empty before we do anything else. If it is, we'll return undefined. But then we have to create a fetch request. So promise.all, similar to what we did before. And we're going to utilize two different functions here. The first one is going to be a tag or tags for post. We're going to fetch the tags for this post, and we're just going to pass an array with one ID because we made that function for multiple posts, but we can just reuse it for one post by passing only one post ID to the array, and the comment counts for posts. Again, same thing, we just pass one ID. Then we get the tag map and the CC map. Going over this, we can get that, and then we'll return the map post row. Same function, but we pass the single row. The tag map, we get it with the ID. If not, we just default to an empty array. And the same thing for the CC map. We're just going to do the exact same thing, but we just change this to say CC map. Perfect. That's all we needed. Now, why is this, because the comment count is a number, not an array. So we just default to 0. Perfect. So we go back here, we import this function, then we do a little check where if there's no post, because this is going to be an individual page. So I can click on this and it will already render this, but obviously there isn't a UI yet and there's some errors, so it'll break. But the idea here is because this is a page that only shows the post if the post exists. If they don't find the post, we're going to send them to the not found page, which is going to be the 404 not found. The same page you see when you go to a random route. Now, what is the next thing we want to do? Well, let's start building the UI. I'm going to return here a div with another div and a link, which is going to have an href taking you to the home page. And inside of here, I'm going to add an icon called arrow left, just because it's a navigation tool for you to go back to the home page if you get here accidentally or something. So back to feed, we're going to import the link from next link, and it should be good to go. So I click on this, I go back to the home page. Perfect. Now we'll add the UI, the styling later on. But for now, let's go actually below the link, and I'm going to render the post as an article. We're going to show a div with the user avatar from NeonDB library. We're going to apply the user as the author. Now, how do we get the author? Well, the author we can get based on the post ID. So we're going to get the author. We're going to utilize the get author by ID, which is a query we're going to make, but we're going to reuse a lot of the stuff that we've done before because we did make another function that was very similar. I'll make it over here. I'll even copy this entire thing and then paste it here. Change the name to say get author by ID. Now the change here is we need an author ID, and when we return a user. Now, how do we fetch this data? Well, to fetch the data about the author, we want to check for the user profile and find a unique user profile where the ID is equal to the user or the author ID. Now, I don't know why this got removed, but this should be a string. Then below this, we want to return a row. But the thing is, we want to return a specific type. And if row is valid, meaning you found a user, then we return just an object with the user ID and the username. That's all we need to know. If not, then we want to return a row with a like an a randomly generated username, just in case we generate this. Perfect. Now we want to fetch this data here, and it should apply. So it knows that who
whoever created this was apparently their name is US. Now, next thing I want to do is I'll come down to below the user avatar. We're going to put a span, add the user name. So user, and then add the author.username. Then add another span, add this, add another span, and then we format relative time, utilize the helper function we made, and we utilize the post.created@. We've done this already before, so I won't go too much into details, but this is how it looks. We can actually even copy and paste a lot from that, but I'll rewrite it just for you guys. Then I'll make an H1 for the title. So I'll say post.title. And then I want to check to see if there is some hashtags. Now, we've done this logic before, so I'll copy and paste it from the post card. It's this logic over here. It will even come with some styles. But the thing is, we need to get the primary tag from this post. Now, we've done this logic before here as well. We get the primary tag by getting the list of tag slugs and setting it to be like this. Now, the main difference here is that we don't have this map like we did before, but we do have the list of tags. So we can just find the list of tag that equals the primary slug, just like this. And we can get that by listing out all of the tags by creating a variable here called tags and awaiting, calling the list tags function. Now we can get that information, and CN is not defined. Oh yeah, because we imported this, we can just import this. We should be able to see that this post specifically was just about TypeScript. Perfect. Now what next? So after the tags, we need to render the body. So I'm gonna create a div here for the body, render the post.body, and then below this, I'm gonna add a separator icon from not base UI, but our components. It's not an icon, it's a whole separator, as you can see. Then below this, we're gonna add a div with another div, and we're gonna add the section for the upvoting and downvoting for this post. So we're gonna have that here too. We're gonna call the vote buttons component. We're gonna reuse it. I'm actually gonna call it twice in here, and we're gonna pass in a couple things. So this is gonna be for the post. So the target is gonna be post. The target ID is gonna be the post ID. So post.id. And then we'll need to get the score and the user vote later on. But for now, we'll just finish building this UI here. In fact, I might even just comment this out so it doesn't keep giving us an error message. The next thing is we're gonna add a span, which is gonna include the amount of comments. So I'm gonna say message square and add the comment count. So I'll say comment count is, and then comments. Now, how do I get that comment count? Well, I can actually just get it from saying post dot comment count, and then it should say 3 comments. Then below this, we're gonna go down a div, and I'll add the same kind of buttons that we had here. So I'm gonna add the share button. Perfect. And just import this icon, and we should be good to go. Perfect. Now we can, before we reach and start doing the comment section, let's make all of the stuff that we have here work. We'll start by just adding the styling for all of this. So I'm gonna add the style, and I'll be back in a second. Perfect. So as you can see, I added all the styles. You can take a look at what I added over here. And the next thing we want to do is get the user vote and the score so that we can render the vote buttons, the upvote and downvote. Now, to do that, I am going to just come here. We have functions that is going to help us with that already. You can get the post score. This is not a function we currently have. So we'll have to do it actually. So I'm going to come here to queries, and I'm going to create this function. Now, this function is actually pretty simple because it reuses a bit of what we already have for the user votes. If you check the logic and the votes logic, I'm just gonna paste it here so you guys can see. We're basically just aggregating the posts, right? The sum of all the posts for this specific post, and we're getting that value. So you add the positive upvotes and you downvotes, and you subtract the downvotes, and then you're able to get this data. So we get the score, and after that we need to know if the user voted. So we're gonna call get user vote, which is a function we already have, but for that we need the session user. So we're gonna also get the session user by calling the get session user that we created. We'll paste here the session user.id, and then the target is gonna be a post. We're trying to get the user post, and then the post ID. Perfect. Now we have all the data we need for the vote buttons, and we are able to upvote and to downvote. Wow, that looks a bit broken, but we're gonna address it in a second. So the next thing we wanna do is start displaying the comment section. Now, there are comments already, as you can see, but there's no way for us to display them. So here is what I wanna do. First, we're gonna render the UI that displays the comments. So I'm going to come here
below the article, it's going to be a different section. I'm going to add a div with an h2 tag that just shows the comment count again. Post.comment count, and then say comments. Then what I want is I want to show below this div a little a piece of UI that depends on whether the user is logged in or not. If the user is logged in, then I'm going to render a div with some component that allows the user to write a comment. If not, then I want to render this kind of default UI, which I won't even show myself writing just because it's just a default case. It just says like, hey, to join this discussion, log in. So if you want to write a comment, log in. Now we're not seeing that because I am logged in. So we're seeing this div. Now, in order for us to be able to obviously see this post or write a comment for this post, we're gonna use this component called the comment composer. Now, this will require us to pass a post ID, gonna be a post.id, and a session user. Perfect. Now, what is this component gonna look like? Well, first of all, we're gonna create it in a new folder called the post folder, and we'll create here the comment composer.tsx. Then what we want here is we want to export a function called comment composer, and the props for it, it's going to be all of the data that we passed here, but we only passed the post ID and the session user. Now the rest is the parent ID, which right now we're not going to add because this is for when you're writing a reply. A placeholder, which in case you want to add a placeholder, you can, but the default one is going to be add a comment, and also compact, which again is going to be something that we're going to add when we start setting up replies. Now, what we want to do in here is we want to return just a form. This form will include a couple inputs. The first input is going to be a hidden input, which represents the post ID. Now, why are we doing that? Because this is not a client. No, why are we doing this? Well, we're doing this because it's an easy, hacky way for us to get access to the data from the form, some data like post ID and so on, without having to pass them when we call our server action that actually utilizes or acts upon this form being submitted. So we're going to do one for the post ID and one for the parent ID. But the parent ID, like I said, it's going to be only for when we set up the replies. In fact, I might even just comment this out. Next thing is I want to show the user avatar. We're going to call that component that we've used from NeonDB, and it's just going to render the user avatar. Let me just import this so we can start seeing the UI, but this is how it's going to look. It's the avatar of the user logged in, not the one who created the post. Now, next thing, we want to show the text area that is going to allow the user to type on the post or on the comment. So type a comment. I'm going to import the text area component, and there's a couple of things we want to put here. We want to put some UI that determines what this is, the name of it, the placeholder, and the amount of rows. So this is a comment we can write. You see there's a placeholder, and it looks exactly how we want it to. Finally, I want to add a button. It's going to go below this div. We're going to call our button component, and for this button component, I'm just going to say comment for now, because if it's replying, we're going to reuse that. Now, next thing we want to do is we want to create a ref that is going to keep track of this form. To do that, we're going to have to use the useRef hook, meaning this has to be a client component. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to create the ref. Let's call it form ref, use ref, and then make it null initially. Then I want to create a function that will be called when we want to submit. So on submit, then we're going to pass in the following type for the arguments. We're going to get the event from the form. And the first thing we do is we just prevent default. Now, the next thing is I want to keep track of both the pending state and the error state of submitting this form, of trying to comment. So we're going to create a error state, which we're going to manually track, and a transition, which we're going to use similar to what we did before using the use transition hook. We'll start by setting the error to null so that we reset it in case something happened before. And then we want to get the form information from the current target of this form. I'm going to say const form. Then I want to get the form data by saying new form data, and I'm going to pass the form here. Finally, I want to start the transition, meaning that here is where we're going to call the server action that is going to create a comment. So I'll create this function here, and in here we want to call a server action called create comment action. We're going to have to create that. We don't have it yet. So what I want to do is I want to go to our actions folder over here, and I'm going to create a
comments. So this is all of the server actions related to comments. So in here, I want to export async function create comment action. I want to make sure this is a server, use server, so that server actions actually work. And in the arguments of this, what we're going to do is we want to get two things: the previous state of the form and the current form data. Now you'll see why we want to do that. It's mostly for the error state and whether or not it worked or not. So we'll create this type called comment form state, which is just an object saying, was there any errors while we were trying to create a comment, and was it okay or not? So inside of here, we'll import it here so we can already get it. This also means we need to pass in the values. So since we're doing this initially here, I'm just gonna put null and fd, which is the form data. It's what the user typed on the form here. We're gonna come here and we want to start by checking to see if the user is logged in or not. So we'll do the same thing we did on all the other server actions. We'll check to see if they're logged in. If not, then just return a message. Then we want to get all the different parts of that form. So we created a couple fields here. We created the post ID, the parent ID, and also we created the body. So we're gonna have to get all three of them here. That means if I'm already getting the parent ID, I might just uncomment this, which is okay. Now we get them by utilizing the form data.get and transforming them into a string. After we get them, if for some reason the post ID is null or the body of the comment is empty, we're just going to return early an error saying that you cannot comment nothing, right? You can't just post a comment that has no text in it. Then after this is done, we're going to call the add comment function. Now the add comment function, we're going to create it right now. It's going to look a bit like this. We're going to export async function add comment. It's going to take in an input, which is going to have four things inside of it. It's going to have a post ID, a parent ID, an author ID, and a body. And what does it return? It returns a comment promise. Now the comment is a type that we don't have, so we'll have to go to our types here. Let me just click on something. Post. Okay, and we'll create here on the types, we'll create the comment type. Then we'll come here to comments, we'll import that. Did we not export this properly on types? Did we save this? Yeah, then let me import it over here. Perfect. Then inside of here, I want to do one simple operation, which is add a new row to the comment table. So we're going to call Prisma and we're going to access the comment table and call the create function. We're going to add a new comment with a post ID, an author ID, and a parent ID, and a body. Then in the end, we want to return whatever the data that we get back in a very specific way, including the day in which this was created, converted to ISO string. Perfect. Now we need to pass in the input of this form. That's why it is giving us an error over here. Now, what do we want to pass to this? Well, we want to pass in the post ID, the author ID, the user ID, and the parent ID. But we don't have the parent ID because we just have the raw version of it. So what I'm going to do is I want to come below this here and create the parent ID by checking to see if there was a raw value of it. And if there was a raw value of it, then I want to get that raw value, check to see if it wasn't null. And if it wasn't null, then I'll just pass back the parent ID raw. If not, I'll return null. Why am I doing all of this? Because this will matter a lot for when we start writing our replies. And we don't want to confuse the UI, or else it will start glitching for when you're trying to like when you try to click for like replying to someone, it will actually glitch out. Perfect. Now, what do we want to do after this? Well, we're going to revalidate two different paths in here. We want to revalidate the path for the individual post screen and also the home screen, because now the comment count changed, a bunch of stuff changed. Now I'll return an OK as true, because if there was any errors, we would have handled them before already. Perfect. Now let's go to the comment composer and we should be good to go. We'll get the response of whatever we get back from that. And if there is an error in the response, then I want to set that error to be equal to the state, right? The state, I want to set it to be equal to the error we get back. Then also, I want to, again, refresh the route. So I'm going to call the use router hook. And there's two things I want to do. First, I haven't actually used this form ref that we created. I'll use it right now. But why are we using that ref? Well, it's an easy way for us to reset the value of that input without having to create a state for it. Because what we can do is we keep track of it, we set the targets, and then down here, we can just reset the form by utilizing the target that we get from this. Now, why does it say Did we import? Okay, we imported the wrong use router. It has to be the one from Next Navigation. Perfect. Now let me just put some of the final styles to this UI that we haven't yet, and also call the onSubmit when the user submits the form. Now I'll add the styles and I'll be back in a second when it's done. Perfect. I just added a couple class names, but I also did one thing. I rendered the error in case there was an error so we can see it as a message. And I also added this little pending state where I disabled the button. We get the pending state from the use transition, and I change the text to say something different depending on the pending state. Now let's try this. If I say, hey, this is so true, click comment, should be posting. It now says 4 comments. If we check our DB, we should be able to see, let's see if there's an author. Okay, this seems to be what I wrote. Yeah, hey, this is so true. Perfect. Now we don't have any way to display the comments yet, is what we're gonna do next, but we see that the comment count here increased, and also we see the comment count here increased because we revalidated the cache for that. Okay, now let's go back to where we call the comment composer, and let's add a bit of styling to this, because even though we added styling to everything else, we didn't add any styling to the comment section. Now we'll start by just adding styling to the section itself. You'll see it will look a lot better. Then what else? We want to add some spacing here, especially in the comment count. So I'm gonna add some class names to this div and to the comment count, and then finally some spacing with the button and with the bottom, because we're gonna show down here the actual thread of the comment section. Perfect. Now, where do we put the comment thread? Well, we're gonna do it over here. I'm gonna create a component called comment thread, and we add a tree, comment tree. I'm gonna add a post author ID, which is going to be a post.authorID, and a session user, which is going to be just the user logged in. Now, before we create that, what is this comment tree that we created here? Well, this is actually something we need to fetch from up here. We're going to request the comment tree for this post. It will be a little bit complicated, but I'll try to explain as much as possible. We're going to create a query called getCommentTree, and that's going to require us to pass a post ID and a session ID, so the user logged in. I'll even close this off because for now it's going to be a lot of coding. Now, for the getCommentTree, we're going to go to queries, and I'm going to create somewhere over here. I'll create it down here actually, and I'm going to export an async function called getCommentTree, and we require it to be an ID, a post ID, and a session user ID. Now, what is it going to return? It's going to return this thing called an enriched comment node. Now, to do this, we're actually going to create, even though the query isn't here, we're going to create a new file in here. It's going to be called the comment tree.ts, because there's a lot of logic that goes in here. Now, the first thing we need to do is define the type, which we called here the enriched comment node. Now, what is this gonna look like? Well, it's gonna look like this. I'll just import here the user so that we can have access to it. Now, the enriched comment node is a node in the tree. If you think of a comment tree, each comment can have a child, which is the reply, and that reply can have a child and can have a sibling, meaning other people reply to the same comment. It's a tree data structure, and if you're not that familiar with data structures, this might be a little bit complicated for you, but this is how you can set up replies. It is the only way to structure this. Now, if you look, each comment has an ID, a post ID, a parent in case they are a reply, a body, which is what the person commented, when they were created, the author of the comment, the author information, so their username and so on, the upvotes for this comment, and what the user already upvoted for this. So it has everything in one place, but also it can have children, which are lists of this same type. So it's a recursive type. Now, what is the next thing we need to do? We'll import this, and we're gonna go back to that comment tree more, but for now, we're going to get all of the comments for this post. So to do that, we're going to create here an await called list comments for post. It's gonna be a function that gets all the comments, but the thing is, we're gonna list them in a flat way, and then we're gonna convert it into a tree-like structure. Now, where is this list comments for post? It's actually pretty simple, so I'll go a bit fast with this one. We're just gonna create it over here, and the idea here is that we want to just look for the Prisma comment table, find all of the comments with this post ID. And then we're going to return a very specific type. We're going to loop through them and convert them into whatever the type for comment. Oh, what type is this? Did we accidentally import the wrong type here? We actually haven't imported the comment type. So let's do that. Let's remove this and then import comment from types. And now it should work. Perfect. So we're going to get that flat value. And the first thing we do is we check to see if it's empty. If it is, we just early return an empty array for us to not waste any more API calls. The next thing is we want to create a set of all the unique author IDs. So we've seen this pattern before. We just create a set. We loop through the flat list of comments for this post, and we just get all of the author IDs. You'll see why we're doing this, because to get that list of IDs, we can call the batch author for IDs function we used previously, where we get all of the authors based on a list of IDs. And we now have this author map, which we can use to get information about each individual author. Now, we want to do a similar thing with the comments. We want to get a list of the comment IDs. Now, we don't need to set it because it is unique by default. We know that each comment is going to be unique because that's how we structured our Prisma table. Then the next thing is we're going to pass this into a function we haven't created yet to get the map of each of the score for each comments. A score, if you remember, is the sum or the aggregate of the amount of upvotes and downvotes, but this time is for a comment. So I'm gonna await batch comment scores, and I'm gonna pass the comment IDs. Now, where do we get this batch comment scores? It's gonna be exactly how we did for the user votes. I think it's this one, right? Yeah, this one. So it's going to be very similar to this. So I'm going to put it over here and we're going to paste it. This is how the function is going to look. The only difference is instead of fetching it for posts, we're fetching it for comments. And we're returning a map of it. We're just grouping all of the votes for this specific comment, for this specific post. Then when we get that data back, we'll have the score map, and we're going to create a vote map, which is based on the current user logged in. We're going to session user ID, check to see if it's valid. If it is, we're going to call the batch user votes for comments. So we're going to create that function, and we're going to pass the session user ID and the comment IDs. Now, if not, then we just return an empty map of what a vote looks like. Now, if you recall, we're basically doing the same thing we did here for user votes for posts and vote sum for posts, but we're doing this now for comments. And the logic for the batch user votes for comments is the same thing, but we account for the fact that we're looking only for the comments or the votes for this comment based on the current user logged in. Then we'll come down here and we'll have all of the data we need to create the comment tree. So in here, we're going to create the enriched version of this flat tree. We're going to map through it and we're going to construct this enriched version of the tree by first getting the author and using the author.map get the c.author ID. Then I'm going to check to see if there's no author. I keep importing auth. Sorry about that. If there isn't, I'll just return null. Then I want to return the exact structure of what this comment is going to look like. It's going to look like this. It's going to have all of the information that a comment already has, plus it's going to have the full data about the author, not just the author ID, the sum of the scores, and if the user voted, upvoted or downvoted. So we're going to include the 3 extra things that we just got from this. Perfect. Then after we map through this, we actually want to filter it. We want to filter it because we want to filter out any nil objects in here. Now, the way you can do this is actually a bit interesting. You can just say X is a non-nullable. Why is this giving me an error? I think it's because we haven't done this. So X is a non-nullable type of X. So this is us just generating a specific type for this. If you're not familiar with TypeScript that much, this will look a bit weird, but to be honest, you don't even need to do this. This is fine. But we're just doing this to enforce the best type of type safety, and we're going to filter out anything that is null. Perfect. Now we return. But do we just return the enriched version? No. This is where we build the tree. We enriched the flat, and now we create the tree-like structure. I'm going to create a nest comment rows function, which is going to take in the enriched version, and it's going to actually build the tree. Now, to do that, we're going to come here to the comment tree, and we're going to create it here. We're going to create the function nest comment rows. It's going to take in a flat but enriched comment row, comment node. No, it's not a comment node. It's a comment row, which is another type we're going to make here, which is it's a comment plus the new fields, which is exactly what we did over here, where we added the author, score, and user vote. Then we'll change this to say user row, and it's going to be an array of it. Finally, this should return an enriched comment node array. Perfect. Now, how do we structure this? First, we want to create a hash map. So we'll create here a hash map of a string with the enriched comment node. Then we want to loop through each of the items in the flat array, and we'll add an item to the hash map with all of the information about this specific comment. Now, why is it giving us an error? Interesting. Wow. This is actually, did I do something wrong with the type here? Oh, I actually didn't import comment again. I need to import comments from types, and now it should work. Perfect. So we're creating the hash map. Then we're going to get the roots, define a type, meaning an array of enriched nodes, which is going to be empty. Now we can make it into a const, even though we're going to update it, because we're going to update it, we're going to mutate it. Then we're going to do for const c of flat. We're basically looping through the flat again. We're going to get each node from the map.get c.id. And what we do with it is we first check to see if there's no node. If not, then just continue. If there is, we want to check to see if it is a reply. So we're going to get a parent ID, and if the map has that parent ID, then we know it's a reply. So we say map.get the parent ID, and we get the children of it, and we push this node. So we know that inherently in a comment, you don't know all your children's, but you know if you have a parent, right? Meaning you know if you are a reply. So what we're doing here is, if we know that we as a comment is a reply, we're basically adding ourselves to the children of our parent. I know it's complicated, but this is what I find interesting about building this project, because a lot of times when you're applying for a job, you find yourself never working with data structures and algorithms, and this shows you practical application of data structures and algorithms. So in case it isn't a reply, then we don't need to care about all of that. We'll just say roots.push the node. So the roots are all of the parents, or the parents, the ones that aren't a reply, and these are all the replies. Perfect. Now, what do we need to do? Well, I'm actually going to do something interesting. I'm going to create a function inside of here. I'm going to create a function called sortch. And we're going to create here, this function is going to take in a nodes, an enriched comment node array. And what we want to do with this is it's going to get those nodes, and it's going to sort it. Sort A, B, and it's going to sort it based on the date. So I'm going to say new date. We're going to sort it based on the created time. So we're going to get the time so that we can see the newest posts first. So we're going to do this, and then we're going to get the other time, the day of the B. So that's how we determine. It's just the difference between them, and we get the latest ones. Then inside of the sortch, we're going to loop through each of them and call the sortch function recursively for its children. So that's why we needed to make it into a function, because then this will eventually finish off and stop running if there isn't any more children for this specific node. After this, we call the sortch once with all of the roots, and it will build the tree. We have the roots, and with having this recursive function, it is going to build out all of the children and sort them. Finally, we just return the roots because it is going to add to the roots and to the nodes. So we don't need to worry about anything. It's mutating everything directly into the array that we already have. And we all of a sudden have the comment tree. Now we'll import this function, and we now have the get comment tree function working. We can import it here as well, and we should be able to use it. Now, that was a lot of work, I know, but we can now use it to render the comment thread. So we'll come here. We're going to create this comment thread component now. We're going to create it in the components folder for post. I'm going to create here the comment thread.tsx, and in here, I'll export a function called comment thread. This won't actually be that complicated because we're going to create another component to render each individual node. Now, what is the type that we're returning here? Well, we are on the props. We're going to get the tree, the post author ID, and the session user. And the tree is going to be the type of enriched comment node. And for user, it's going to be the user type that we have from our types folder. Now, first thing, if the tree is empty, we want to empty return saying no comments yet. Now, none of the comments that we have that. All of them have a comment because we seeded it. So we won't be able to see this, only if we create a new post. But we'll assume it works, and we'll continue by adding in an unordered list of the comments. Now, for this unordered list, I'll already space each of the comments out with a space y of 6. Then inside of this unordered list, I'm gonna loop through the tree, and inside of this loop, we're going to render a component called comment node. Now, we're going to get the node from here, and this component will take in a node, a post author ID, and a session user. So let's create that component. We're going to create it also in the same placings here. We're going to say comment node.tsx, and in here, we're going to export function comment node. Important with this one, this is going to be a client component. So I'm going to say use client. Perfect. And the comment node is important because it will contain the upvoting session, the actual field to reply, and so on. So in fact, if we import this, we might already be able to start seeing the comments. So what is this? Oh yeah, we have to actually put the props for the component. So he takes in an enriched node and a user. And also I'll just return here like a button, just so you guys can see that it will render. Let's refresh this. Actually, it isn't rendering. So maybe there's a bug there, but let's just write something here. Let's see if it works. Oh, it showed up here, but it should show up like the same amount of times as the tree. But for now, it's fine. Let's just continue with this and let's see if it works as we continue adding stuff. Now, the first thing we want to do is we want to add a list item because this is inside of an order list, and we want to add a div that is going to encompass everything. So we're going to create here the list item and the div, and inside of this div, we're going to, right off the bat, add the vote buttons. Now, for the vote buttons, we don't really need to do anything else because when we created our comments tree, we already structured this. So we can just add the node.id and the score and the user vote. And you see that in fact, we see that we have 3 comments in here instead of 4, which is an issue, but we'll address it soon. Now, you see one of them already has 2 upvotes. I think that's from the seeding file. So we already are able to upvote a post. Now, the next thing we can do, in fact, actually, I think one of the comments might be a reply. So that's why it's not showing up here. Now, the next thing we want to do is below this vote buttons, we're going to add another div. And inside of this div, we're going to add a div with a span. Now, this is going to look a lot like what we've already done before. We're going to render here the username of the user. Oh yeah, this is me. See, this is the comment I wrote. Okay, we're going to render the username of the user. And one thing we do need to know is we need to know if the user is the OP. So OP is original poster, is a terminology on Reddit, and to know if the user is the OP, we just need to check to see if the node author ID is equal to the post author ID. So that's the idea. If the reply or the comment came from the one who wrote the post originally. Now, if the user who wrote this comment is the OP, then we want to render a little badge that it's going to be not from Lucid, it's going to be from our own component library that says OP. Perfect. Now, the next thing we want to do is right next to it, we want to add the format relative time to show when the comment was created. And below this, we want to actually show the comment. So I'm going to go a div down and I'm going to render the body of the comment. So we can clearly see the comment being shown. Now, we should be able to reply to stuff and show the replies. We are not doing that yet. Now, before we start working with that, I want to just add the last few styles that we need here. So it's pretty much just the styles for this, and it looks already a lot like Reddit. Now, the next thing we want to do is below the body here, the node.body, I want to add a reply button and a share button. So it's exactly like the comment button that we had before with the share button, but it's a reply one. Now, for the reply button, it's going to matter a lot whether we show it or not, because if you already replied, we're going to have a different state showing that. That's why we made this a client component, because we're going to have to create a show reply and a set show reply state. So I'm going to set this equal to use state, and I'll set it to false initially. But when you click on it, it should be able to show like a little a text field that you're able to reply to a comment. Now, how do we show that? Well, below the reply button, I'm going to go a div below this. We're going to check to see if the user's logged in, because they can only reply if they are logged in, and if the show reply is true. If that's the case, then we want to render this div with a comment composer, which is the component we already created just writing a normal comment. Now, what do we put in here? Well, because this is a reply, we have a couple other props that we didn't before. Why is this broken? Oh, I need to close this div, sorry. So what are the props that we didn't have before? Let me just pull this out here. Well, no, we had the props before, we just never used it. It was the parent ID, because this is a reply, so we pass the current node as the parent ID, and we use the compact, because now we know that this is a small place, so we can make it into a compact one, so it's a lot smaller. Now look at this, as I click reply, it will open a reply tray for each of the individual nodes, and that's because each of the individual nodes have their own show reply state, because it's inside of this component. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to actually render the replies. Now, we don't need to write a reply yet. This should work to write a reply, by the way, but we don't need to do that yet because we still have to show the replies. And I have a feeling that the seeding file that we wrote includes replies as well. So I'm going to come down here below this show reply stuff, and I want to start rendering the replies. This won't be hard because we already created the best infrastructure. In fact, this is going to be a recursive component because a reply or a children, right, is just a comment node that has a parent. So what we can do is we can check to see if the length is greater than 0 of the children. If it is, it means there are replies to this comment. And if so, we add an unordered list, which we loop through that specific node, get the children's, and loop through each of them to render a new comment node. And this comment node will have the value of the children, the post author ID, and the session user. I'm also going to add some styles here. I'm going to basically just apply to this unordered list here. I'm going to say class name is equal to this. So there's a little bit more style to it. And you can see that the reply already shows up. So this is how this is going to work. I can even reply to this reply and it shows up as a reply. Now, I don't know if liking a comment is working yet. I don't think it will actually, but you can clearly see that we are able to have a thread. And let me try replying actually to this one. Let's see if it works. Yes, it does. So you can see that the reply thread, the tree-like structure works in different levels, right? The root and the children's. Perfect. So this is pretty much it for this entire section. We can comment, we can comment, we can reply, and so on. And it also impacts the total value of comments. So the replies impacted the total comment count over here. Perfect. So now, what is the next thing that we want to do? Well, I want to get the comment likes to work because I feel like that's an important one. So I'll go to vote buttons. Let me check to see what is the only thing that we need for this to work. Oh yeah, we never added a functionality for voting for a comment. So in case it isn't a post on the voting functionality, we want to add a server action that is going to vote a comment. So I'm going to vote comment action, target ID, and the value. Now this is going to be pretty simple because it's exactly the same as the vote post action, but we're going to put it on the comments over here. We're going to put it down here probably. And it's exactly the same behavior. We just get the current user logged in, check to see if they're logged in. If not, we return early. Then we're going to have this find comment by ID, which is the same thing as the find post by ID. We're going to create here this function, and it does is it looks for the specific comment in the comment table with this ID, and it returns it in a way that we want it to look like. Then we want to create this vote comment function. The vote comment function does the exact same thing as the vote post function. It will delete first all of the current votes for that post related to that you did, and it will create if you are trying to do something different. But in this case, it is going to be for the voting for a comment, not a post. But then there's one last thing we need to do, which is getting the user vote. Now, getting the user vote is a bit different. We're going to put it in the queries here because we already have get user votes. Sorry, that was my mistake. We'll just import it. It should work now because we also added the comment as the target type. And in the get user vote, we pass the correct target type to this Prisma call. So this should be working now. This should be working. Let's just import this. Let's check to see. I'm going to refresh this, upvote this, boom, upvote this, boom, upvote this, downvote this, downvote this. Let me refresh this and beautiful. So everything seems to be working. Now, what is left? Well, there isn't a lot left. I'm gonna get a quick win out of the way, which is just the list of tags. For that to work, it's actually pretty okay. I don't know if you remember, but we created this left tags over here. I'll just close everything else, sorry. We created this left tags on the layout. We never did anything with it. Now, the left tags will literally just loop through a list of tags that we pass to it with the specific counts of how many of them it exists. Now, I need to keep this open so that you can see, because when it gets too small, this sidebar will collapse. Now, the idea here is, how do we get the tags with count? So in the left sidebar component, we have over here at the top a client component, so we can't really fetch from here. But this left sidebar is called from here. And in the layout, we can fetch that data pretty easily. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna create a tags list here, await tags or tag post counts. We wanna get the count of the tags for each of the posts. Now, to do that, we're gonna go, oh, it should be tag post counts. We're gonna go to the queries down here. Where is the queries? Queries. Perfect. And we're going to create, I'll go to where we have the other tag stuff, which is all the way up here. And the idea here is we're going to get the list of tags by calling the list tags function. We're going to group each of them based on the tag slug. We're going to create a map of each of their accounts. And then we're just going to return that map as an array. So that's literally what we do. We group them, we get the counts, and now we're able to know how many times or how many posts per hashtag or tag exists. And we can show them in order in our sidebar. So I'm gonna import this, and we can pass this as a prop to the left sidebar. So I'm gonna pass here tags with counts, and I'm gonna add the tags. Now we obviously have to change our props from this component. I'm gonna change this to include a tags with counts. And what is that gonna be? What is that type? It's actually gonna be a list of, it's going to be an object list, which is going to include a tag and the count. We'll get the tag type from our types file. And in our left tags, we're going to pass a prop called items, which is just the tags with counts. Perfect. Now in our left tags component, we're going to add that as a prop. Perfect. So now this does an error, and we're gonna loop through each of them. So we're gonna loop like this. We're gonna say items.map, and let me just close this up. Get each of the items. I'm gonna get the tag and the count. And for each of the items, I'm gonna return a list item. Now, let's see how this looks. Oh, that already collapsed. So let me just add something. Okay, so we see all the different tags that are available, and we can see it is rendering that list. So we're getting the content correctly. Then I'll put a link in here, because when you click on the tag, it should actually filter based on that tag. So I'm going to import from NextLink. I'm going to put here an href. Now the href we're going to pass is going to be based on the tag slug. So we're going to navigate to basically filter for that specific tag. Then inside of here, we're going to render a span, which is going to include the tag label so we can see it. And we also want to color it. To color it, I'm going to do this. I'm going to style it and then just put the color is equal to tag dot, wait, what did I do? Color is equal to tag dot hash color. And now each of them have their own color. Perfect. Then I want to render the count. Now the count is going to be a span, but we're going to create this function called format count. It's going to be a helper function. I think we're only going to use it here, but it's going to be in the same place as we created our format relative time. Was it here? Where was it? It was here, format. Now this function will look like this. We don't want to show exactly the amount, especially for a website like Reddit, which has like millions and millions of users. You don't show the entire, like there's 26.8 million posts or with this hashtag. It converts. So if it's more than a million, we're going to show it with just like the number plus the M. And then if it's thousands, we show the number plus the K. This is how we format. I always add this into my social media projects because it's a very useful little function. Then I'm going to import this, and the website broke, but you can see here. And this is the amount of posts with each of the hashtags. Now we can actually style this a lot better. So I'm going to put the CSS and I'll be back in a second. Perfect. So this is how they look. There's just an issue, which is if you look in this, it's not sorted at all. It's very unorganized. In fact, since this is top tags, I want to put the tag with the most amount of hashtags right at the top over here. So to make that happen, what I want to do is I want to sort the items. So I'll create this sorted array here. I'm going to get the list of items, make a copy of it, and then sort it. I'm making a copy because I can't just mutate or sort this prop. That's not how props work. And I'm gonna sort it based on the count. So a simple sort where we get the count, we subtract count, and then we just slice it. We only want to show the top 8, not the entire thing. And then we'll, instead of using the items, we use the sorted. And now it is sorted. Beautiful. And when I click on it, it takes me to that specific tag. But there was an error here, but it seems to have been just a one-off error. Perfect. So we're able to sort based on this as well. Awesome. Now there's only one functionality left, really. I mean, we could actually, this looks a bit weird because there's no, news tab on the right. And if you look at this one, there is. Now, to have this work, you would have to have a lot more scope to this project. Now, I actually, just to make it look a lot better, this is a component that is like mocked, this data. Obviously the top tags isn't mocked, but we just did it over here. But we want to have this structure where you don't have to, you can just see this information, but it doesn't necessarily have to be functional. So to do that, here's what we do. In the page inside of our core in here, we currently just render the feed sort tabs, but nothing below this. Now below this, we're going to add an A side, which is basically representing that it's on the side over here. And we're going to render two things. We're going to render first a component that renders the trending and then the top tags. So I'm going to call this right trending to represent that it's the trending items on the right, and right top tags. Now, both of those components are going to take in some props. Now, the trending, I'm going to start with that first. We're going to pass in the trending values. Like I said, that's going to be mocked. So to get that information, I'm actually going to come here and I'm going to call this query, which isn't really a query because we're not fetching any data. We're just going to have a mocked array, and we're going to say trending today. Then we're going to create here a lib file called trending. And here is the mocked data that we created. You can put whatever you want, make it look nice. And this is how you can rank. You can actually put more than just 5, but I put 5 because it looks a lot better. I'm gonna fetch this, and we're gonna create the component for the right trending tab. I'm gonna put it in the layout over here, right trending and .tsx, and this is the UI that should go on it. I'm not gonna go over the UI. There's no point. This is just UI for that section. It's nothing new, and there's an error. It's because we have to import it. But this is how it's gonna look like. Oh, it seems like we need to pass items, not trending. Okay, but this is how it looks like. Okay. I also want to add a class name to this A side section over here, so it's a bit more structured. But other than that, it looks cool. Now, I'm not going to go over adding the top tags actually, because you guys, I just realized we just did this, and there's one more functionality that we haven't done yet, which is being able to create a post. So I would much rather just spend the rest of the video creating that functionality and then leave this as homework because we just did it, so you should be able to do it as well. Okay, so the last thing we want to do is the submitting functionality. So creating a new post, right? So if you see in the homepage, we'll have here the create button, and it will take us to the submit page. Now to do this, I'm going to actually close all this. I'm going to open up here, and we're going to create a new folder here called submit and a page.tsx. Now, in here, what we want to do is we want to export default async function submit page. And the first thing we want to do is, in order to create a post, you have to be signed in. So we want to double check to see if the user is logged in or not by using the get session user. And since this is a server component, that's why we have an async. I can also use the redirect function from Next Navigation. It will redirect us. Perfect. Then we want to return some UI. The UI I want to return is a simple form. So I'm going to have here a div with another div. This one will just show a bit of information about the user and what they're about to do. So I'm going to say this, create post, signed in as this account, post use tags instead of communities. Then we're going to close this div, and you're going to allow the user to cancel in case they accidentally came to here. So I don't want to create a post, right? So you just click here to cancel, and you go back to the homepage. But then the last thing we want to do is actually, I want to wrap this div around all of this, and I want to add the submit form. So submit post form. Now, what is this post form going to look like? Well, it's going to be a component in the post folder. We're going to call it submit post form. And the idea here is we want to export a function called submit post form. There's not going to be any props. It's just a simple form with a action that is going to be executed from this form. Now, what action is it going to be? Well, we're going to be utilizing the use action state, which is a very nifty hook that gives us access to the state, the action, and the pending state. So I'm going to use the use action state. To use it, I actually need to make this into a client component. Use client. Then we're going to need to pass in two things inside of this use action state, but for now we're just going to get back the state, the action, and pending. Now, what do we want to pass here? Well, we want to pass the action that is going to be executed when we submit the form. So that action is going to be the create post action, which is an action that we haven't actually created yet. So we're going to have to create it. We're going to create it on the actions for posts, and we're going to create it down here. We're going to call it port async function create post action. Now, what do we want to create this post action with? Well, we want to know what the previous state of the form is. So post form state, similar to what we did when we were using the, I think it was when we previously did for the voting, right? So we kind of want to have the same idea here. I'm going to create the post form state as an error and null. And then I also want to get the form data, which would be of type form data. The return for this is going to be the post form state. Now, what do we put inside of here? Well, we want to put first a validation to see if the user is logged in, which is common with all of our other actions as well. Then we want to get everything from the form. So the form, we haven't created it yet, but it's going to allow you to add a title, a body to the post, and a list of tags, which is gonna be represented as a single string that is separated by commas. So that's what we need. Now, we haven't added any of that yet, but we're gonna do. But when we do, we're going to have a title, a body, and the tags. Then we want to validate to see if the title is too short, because we don't want people to put like a 2 or 3 character title. So I'm gonna just make this simple. Check here to see if it's less than 4. If it is, we'll return that error. And then, like I said, when we create the post, we're going to put the tags like this, like web dev, TypeScript, AI, whatever, all separated by commas. So we need to find a way to parse that value and get the slugs from it. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to create here a const tag slugs, set it equal to tags raw, which is what we get. And we want to split. Now, what do we want to split it with? Well, I'm going to put a little regex here to guarantee that it's going to split it based on hashtags, spaces, and commas, so that we never get like the hashtag or the commas or whatever. It's actually just the slugs. Then I want to map through each of them to trim it and to lowercase. Then I'm going to filter it. Then I'm going to slice and only get the 5. So slice and get the first 5. Now I'm going to add the post. Now to add the post, we're going to create an add post action as well, or function, which we're going to create down here. It is going to be an async function, which all it does is it just requires us to get the input, which is going to be the author ID, the title, the body, and the slugs, and it returns a post. Now, a post is the type that we have on our types, and to do this, we first get the slugs. So tag slugs, we get it from the props, and then we do input dot tag slugs dot length. If it's not null, then we're just going to put the input.tag slugs, but we do have to add a tag to a post. It's guaranteed. So we're going to default it to web dev, worst case scenario. Then I want to ensure that we create those slugs. So if a user adds a slug that doesn't exist yet, we want to create it and give it a color. Now, you can make it such that it generates a random color if you want to. I made it yellow for all of them, but you can make it look whatever you want. You can make it pink, you can make it green, whatever, or you can make it actually generate randomly. Now, we need to use the tag slugs to map through this. And after this, we want to create the post. To create the post, we're going to say const row is equal to await prisma.post.create, put in the data, which is going to include the author ID, the title, and the body. Then we're going to get, like, we created the post, but we also want to create the post tag. So we created the tag, we created the post, and now the relation between them is going to be the post tag. So we're going to say prisma.post tag.create, and we're going to create many at the same time because it's multiple, right? And the way we associate this is we do data, we get the list of tag slugs, and the create many function allows you to pass a list here. So we're going to pass in a map, loop through every slug, return back a post ID, which is a row.id, and a tag slug, which is just the slug. Perfect. Finally, we're going to return a map post row. Now, what is a map post row? We've had a function similar to it. I'm going to create it down here. It's just a function that you pass in a post result and it maps into it. So you pass in a post record, which is a type that we can import here, like post record. Actually, it should be a post model, and I can import it from Prisma, and it returns it in exactly the way that we want, which is the post that we created. Now in here, we can just use the row, the tag slugs, and 0, because the last is just a comment count, and in this case, it doesn't really matter because you're adding a new post, so it doesn't really have any counts, right? Now, when we come here to our create post action, we're gonna call the add post, and we're gonna pass into it the author ID, which is just gonna be the user ID, the title, the body, and the tag slugs, which we're going to just have to pass in. Again, actually, no, we don't need. We can just pass the tag slugs like this. It's fine. Perfect. After this, we're just gonna revalidate the data. So we want to revalidate 3 different routes: the home route because we added a new post, the submit one because we just created the post, and then finally we want to redirect to the individual post page. So when we create a post, we create it and then we redirect to the page for that specific post. Now we can import this create post action, which means we can actually use it in our project. So I'm going to come here, set a null to this because I do need to do that. And then I'm going to return a form. Now this form, I can pass in the action in here that we get from the use action state. Then I'm going to create a div with a label, which is a UI component we get from ShadCN. In it, I'm going to put title. Then I'm going to put a HTML for, and it's also going to be title. And below this, an input, which is a component we also have. And the fields I want to put for it are, it's the ID, the name. I want to make it required, put a placeholder, a minimum length, and also a bit of a class just to make some styles. Now, I want to do this for all of the different forms. Now, why is this? Oh, I need to put a comma here. Now, I want to do this for all 3. So the body, the tags, and for the title. So I'm just going to paste them over here already with the style, and I'll talk about what they are. So we have to import the text area for the body because it's a text area, not just a simple input. And oh, by the way, I need to import this as well. Forgot about it. Perfect. Should it work now? It should. If I refresh it again. Okay, looks like this, right? So there's a body, a title, and the list of tags. Like I said, put comma separated tags. And finally, I want to render the error in case there is an error. So below, right before the button, we're going to render the error that we get back from the use action state. And then at the end, we can just add a button from our UI library that, depending on when it's pending or not, it's going to say publishing, or it's going to say publish post. Then on the button, I'm going to put a type of submit and disabled equal to pending. Perfect. And that's pretty much it. Let's test to see how this looks. I do have to actually just put a bit more of a class here so that the style doesn't look too ugly. Perfect. I'm going to put, what was the one that I did here? I did one about The Boys, which is a TV show I'm watching. I'm going to just say, oh yeah, The Boys season 5 speak. Okay, The Boys season 5 is 10 out of 10. Actually, I haven't seen the final yet. I don't know if you guys even watched the TV show, but I don't know. There's 2 more episodes left. I think it's pretty good. But yeah, I'm going to put this, and then I'll just put, I'll just repeat this like a billion times. No, this is not what I'm looking for. Okay, perfect. And then I'll just say The Boys, TV shows, superhero, publish post. Okay, it worked because I got navigated to the page for that specific post. So if I go back here, you should see that it should be somewhere, yeah, because I'm ordered in a different way. I can even like it. I can click on this, I can comment, and yeah, everything seems to be working. So that's pretty much it. Now, what does this mean? It means that there are a couple things that you need to address for this project. For example, if you go here, there's a lot. There's the trending. You can add the top tags here. You can add the ability to share, all that kind of stuff. Also, this is mostly based on tags. We're not using communities here, which is the whole point of Reddit, right? Subreddits. But you could do that as well. Also create a profile page. In here, when you click on a user, it just goes to the post. But you could create a profile page. That's a really good example of a feature that would just build upon what we built, and it would make it look a lot better. And on top of that, just dissect everything that we've worked on. I specifically used a more advanced pattern on a lot of this. And if you were expecting a beginner video, I'm sorry, but this wasn't it. This video is a video where I show you how I would build a project like this in reality with maybe a little bit less separation of concerns compared to what I would normally, but still, it's a good example. So if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like down below, comment what you want to see next. Thank you so much, Neon, for sponsoring this video. I've been using Neon forever, so I cannot recommend them enough, and I hope you guys check them out. Click the link in the description to check them out, and yeah, that's basically it. Really hope you guys enjoyed it, and see you guys next time.